I'd like to welcome everybody to the Governing Board meeting for the Scottsdale Unified School District. Today is May 8th. The time is 4:15 p.m. And Mrs. Peterson, would you lead us in the pledge, please? May I have a roll call, please?
Eric Meyer.
Jennifer Peterson.
Pam Kirby.
Denny Brown.
And Bonnie Sneed. I would like to pull item 9Q, approval of the renewal of contracts. One of the contracts, number 11129, Pearson Education, is being pulled from the agenda. So I'd like to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Students and staff recognition and celebrations.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I am very pleased tonight to have some incredible opportunities to recognize great things that are happening in Scottsdale School District. First, we will have Dr. Andy Forlis recognize some individuals that are involved in the I Teach Arizona Mentor Program.
Thank you. The only one of its kind in Arizona, more than doubles the usual amount of time teachers spend in classrooms. This model of teacher preparation provides greater clinical experience through intensive student teaching experiences. These teachers have attended professional development through ASU to coach and support prospective teachers throughout the school year. SUSD's master teachers are recognized for their leadership and commitment to sharing their expertise with ASU students who will be Arizona's newest teachers. I have a long list of teachers to recognize, so when I say their name, just please stand up. Many of them couldn't be with us. They had other commitments this evening, and then I will meet you in the lobby with certificates. We have Karen Adwin, Peggy Ahmad, Lynn Brocktel, Beth Andrea, Angie Catton, Patricia Colafello, Sue Crockett, Shelley Erickson, Rachel Helrig, Joanna Johnson, Gretchen Kaiser, Carol Kuna, Melissa Milstein, Courtney Nielsen, Trish Simmons, Jackie Tankos, Jennifer Velez, Vicki White, Brooke Williams, Brian Wright, Christy Yunkin, Robin Wiley, Jessica Valencia, Michael Mann, Taylor Saval, Jackie Fleming, Kathleen Rep, Jillian Kirsten, Johanna Cowart, Pamela Barbosa, Lavander Grant Suggs, Jenny Ekstrom, Randy Alpers, Carrie Kurland, Maggie Finan, Lana Penfield, Jessica Jaffe, Michelle Zager, Barbara Berry, Amy Berry, Carly Jo Smith, Amanda Wilbur, and Carissa Lutcher, and last but not least is Gloria Vargas, and I'll get these certificates to their principals to get to them.
And we would like to say great job. They really have worked hard, and we have some incredible teachers in the pipeline because of the mentoring that they received from our Scottsdale very own teachers. Next, we have Dr. Dave McNeil that would like to do a presentation regarding the Virginia J. Piper Charitable Trust Back to School grants.
Madam President, Governing Board, Dr. Peterson, Sandra. I have the honor to give a great big thank you to the Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust for awarding 5 of our schools with the 2012 Back to School grant. I'm going to ask that the principals from Navajo, Rob Aguilar, the principal from Tavon, Margaret Cerna, the principal from Tonalea, Lisa Friend, the principal from Yavapai, Wendy Cohen, and the principal from Hohokam, Chad, come on up. Virginia G. Piper has awarded Navajo, Tavon, Tonalea, Hohokam, and Yavapai checks worth $1,200, with the exception of Yavapai, lucky you, Wendy, receiving $2,300.
Oh.
These funds will be used for purchasing resources and school clothing for the most neediest students at their sites. I've been partnerships with Virginia G. Piper for many years, and we're very blessed to be able to call them our friends because they do great things for schools and kids. So we just want to give a big shout out to Virginia G. Piper for doing a great job for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McNeil. Mr. Cliff McKenzie is going to come up and share a great celebration regarding a wonderful activity that our 2 high schools have been awarded, and that is A+ for our 2 high schools.
Good evening, board members, Madam President. I'm shocked. I didn't know I was doing this. Congratulations. I'm going to congratulate 2 of our high schools, Arcadia and Chaparral High School, for earning the A+ School of Excellence Award for the Arizona Educational Foundation for the 2011-2012 school year. And I just want to personally say what an achievement for both schools. I had the opportunity to be at the celebration at Chaparral, and you could see it on the students' faces and the staff faces. They were so proud to receive this award. And so we are extremely proud of these 2 schools and the communities for earning this prestigious A+ School of Excellence designation. In the future, we hope to have all our schools receive this honor. Schools are evaluated in the areas of students' focus and support, school culture, active teaching and learning, curriculum and leadership, community and parent involvement, and assessment. Applications are available to pre-kindergarten, 12th grade schools statewide. The evaluation of each school is based on a lengthy written application and a rigorous site visit by a team of trained judges. In the application, each school provides demographic information, a description of current program and practices, a documentation of parent and community involvement, and a profile of school principal and his and her vision of the commitment to excellence and equality, service, and sustained high achievement of significant improvement in the school's achievement, school's assessment. Preparation of each school's application involves the commitment of all stakeholders, including students, faculty, staff, administration, and community members. A+ School receives $500, a banner designating it as a A+ School of Excellence. All staff and faculty at this award-winning schools will be eligible for partial scholarships, and the award is valid for 3 years. So again, we would like to acknowledge these 2 schools at this time. Arcadia, if the principal from Arcadia and Chaparral could come up for their certificates.
Members of the board, Dr. Peterson, Sandra, I accept this award on behalf of Chaparral, on behalf of our staff, our teachers, our students, and our community. It was a long effort. We started working on this in June, but I do think it did bring us together as a community even more, and I salute everybody involved and our community, the Chaparral community, because that's why we earned this. Thank you.
I too would like to celebrate this with the Arcadia community. Just amazing teachers and staff and parents and students, and also would like to introduce an incredible future leader of Scottsdale Unified School District. This is Katie O'Boyle, who spearheaded the committee for our A+ application under, she was doing her internship with me at the time, and she is going to be one of those stellar leaders for our school district, and want to congratulate her also. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Mrs. Janet Blum, who's going to share a partnership regarding the Kennedy Center with us.
Good evening, Madam President and Governing Board members. This past year, the Scottsdale Unified School District has become a partner in the Kennedy Center Partners in Education program, and several of our teachers from Laguna, Tavan, Yavapai, ANLC, and Hopi have been attending workshops to learn about engaging strategies that integrate the fine arts into their classrooms. So tonight, we've invited Janet Blum, our Fine Arts Secondary Curriculum Specialist, to share just a few of the highlights of this partnership. Janet?
Good evening, Madam President, Scottsdale School Board members, Dr. Peterson and Sandra Como. Kennedy Center Partners in Education is a nationwide collaborative partnership between community arts centers and local school districts. The collaborative efforts assist arts organizations in developing or expanding educational partnerships with their local school systems. This professional development initiative was developed by the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. The founders of the Partners in Education program is based on the belief that the professional development for teachers is an essential component of any effort designed to increase content efficiency for students. Each partnership team consists of at least 2 members, an arts organization such as the Center for the Performing Arts and a neighboring school district, Scottsdale Unified School District and Paradise Valley Unified School District, complete the partnership team and receive professional development opportunities throughout the year. Several members of the partnership are here with us this evening. Tammy Hines from the Center for Performing Arts, Dr. Keith Preston from the Paradise Valley School District, Kelly Ackridge and Stephanie Shammy from Laguna Elementary School under the leadership of Katie Root. This past school year of 2011 and 2012, Scottsdale School District implemented the Kennedy Center Educational Partnership with 3rd grade students from Tavan, Hopi, ANLC, Laguna, and Yavapai. The focus of the teacher workshops centered on the documentation of student growth through visual arts and poetry. In the Paradise Valley Unified School District, a core group of teachers at Greenway Middle School refined arts integration instruction techniques and documentation strategies in preparation for a school-wide implementation of arts-based instruction. The 2012-13 workshops will focus on increasing content efficiency and teacher accountability through strategic implementation of arts integration. The Kennedy Center will create a professional learning community that fosters an environment of collaboration, high-level skills training, and creative problem-solving aimed on increasing student engagement in Common Core standards across the curricular spectrum. On the screen, you will see actively engaged students. At the Center for Performing Arts, you could visit a gallery and see students from Greenway Middle School in Paradise Valley that have worked this year to research and demonstrate social study curriculum items on Cultivating Arizona, 100 Years of Stories and Origins. Next year, Supai Middle School social studies teacher will be Kennedy Center partners under guidance from Cheryl Rednor, Matt Linz, Lisa Zerbel, and myself. Last night, the Kennedy Center teachers met and showed examples of growth through implementation of dynamic curriculum strategies. One example is from Laguna Elementary School and teacher Kelly Ackridge. It's based on the book Dory's Story, about a child's imagination and a fishing expedition. The child's poem is called Ocean Ride. Such a hot summer day, a great day to go for a ride in the boat. I can hear the seagulls chirping for food. I feel as if I'm in boiling water. The ocean feels like winter snow. I smell the revolting scent of the dirty seagulls coming towards me. The ocean breeze tickles my spine. I just can't wait to go for a ride. I would like to sum up my presentation on the Kennedy Center Educational Partnership with a quote from a student in the partnership. We learned how to work with others, use my brain more, and open the gate on my imagination and let go of the creations I have in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. That ends our We have one more. Thank you. We have a presentation from our own Ms. Christine Bono and Officer Fred Pera regarding the Gang Resistance Education and Training Program.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Peterson and Sandra. We are happy to have Officer Fred Pera from the Scottsdale Police Department with us today, and we used his extensive knowledge on utilizing a fantastic program which is called GREAT, Gang Resistance Education and Training, which is similar to the DARE program and then some. And we utilized it at Redfield for our 5th graders. We piloted Laguna for 5th grade, 4th and 5th, and Desert Canyon Middle School for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade through their health program. And Officer Pera can answer any questions you have about the program, but we also came as a team to just reiterate what an amazing program it was. Officer Pera has folders for you that has some great data, and it was very, as one anecdote from Redfield, after the program at elementary is a 6-week program, at the middle school it's 13 weeks, and after the first week at Redfield, a student who had been being bullied was hesitant to say anything, and after the first class made it very clear, and the situation was remedied immediately. And it was a direct result of this great program, of the culture and the collaboration and the warm, the way it was just the overall atmosphere of the class. So I would like to publicly celebrate this program, encourage every school to utilize it next year, and thank Officer Pera and the other principals for utilizing it and taking advantage of this great resource.
Madam President, Governing Board, Dr. Peterson, and Ms. Como. My name is Officer Pera. I'm the School Resource Officer for Laguna, Redfield, and Desert Canyon Elementary School. Back in August, I went to a bullying class seminar that they had here in Phoenix. At the time during the expo, they had the GREAT program. GREAT program has been in existence for 20 years. It was founded here in Phoenix, 1991, with the Phoenix PD and ATF. Scottsdale has not taught the DARE programs in 9 or 10 years. I brought this information back to my supervisor, ran it up my chain of command, and with the help from the principals at all the schools, I pitched it to them, and they said yes, they would want to try it and partake in it. We put a little folder together. You can see it's based on life skills. We say it's gangs. Okay, the first chapter is a little bit about gangs. We're not gang specific. We don't talk about specific gangs, but then we give the kids life skills. How do you do conflict resolution? How do you calm yourself down? Setting goals, making the best decision for you. I put a packet together for you folks. You can actually see what the curriculum is for the elementary school, for the middle school. There's also 2 booklets that we use for the kids. One's in elementary and also another one's middle school. And we did an evaluation, and you'll see in there too that out of 148 students from the middle school, what their response was, and from 39 from the middle school, what their responses were to our questions. So I really appreciate the support of the principals, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this at the schools.
Thank you. I just want to say quickly, you know, we so much value the partnership of Scottsdale Police Department and having officers at our school so that children are familiar with the uniform and see a Scottsdale officer as someone who's there to help them, to coach them along like a team, a game player. And I have to tell you, the impact of having Officer Pera on campus on a weekly basis, in the classrooms, on the playground, in the cafeteria, after having conversations like this, opened up opportunities to dialogue, not just among children, but children to adults. and it really brought that and unified together. So I'd like to thank the Scottsdale Police Department for sharing their officers with us and let them know what a powerful influence their officers are when they are on our campuses. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I would just like to say that it was a very valuable program at the middle school. I can't tell you how many students it touched, how many people it involved, and the conversations that were brought out specifically about a lot of the hot topics that that we're dealing with on middle school campus. So we're very grateful for Officer Para to bring this to our school. Thank you.
Thank you, and we are very grateful for Officer Para and Chief Rodbell and all of our SROs. They do a great job of, one, looking out for the kids and protecting all of us. So we sure are glad you guys are on our side, so thank you.
And I just wanted to follow up and say thank you. It's always nice to see evaluation data after a program has been put into place. So I really appreciate that part. Normally at this time we would have public comments, but nobody has turned in a card. So we're going to go on to superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This evening I'm very happy to announce, but also kind of surprised that it's come this quick. We only have 11 days of school left. It's hard to believe that this year has gone so fast, and we still have a lot of things to do in those 11 days. But in doing that, we have some outstanding folks that every single day make a difference in our classrooms, and that's our teachers. This week is National Teacher Appreciation Week, and I have a proclamation that I'd like to read and then present it to our own SCA President, Jerry Smith. The proclamation is, whereas the vision statement of Scottsdale Unified School District states, a community that engages, educates, and empowers all to excel. Our mission to deliver a world-class education promoting the highest level of academic achievement, creativity, and personal growth that will inspire greatness in today's students and tomorrow's leaders, correlates with this year's theme of the National Teacher Appreciation Week of Great Teachers Make Great Public Schools. And today's students will be the leaders of tomorrow. The successful teachers is reflected in the support given to them by their community. And whereas the purpose of the National Teacher Appreciation Week is to focus attention on the important role educators play in our country and its future, I therefore, on behalf of the governing board, do hereby proclaim that the week of May 7th to 11th, 2012 is National Teacher Appreciation Week in the Scottsdale Unified School District. I further encourage all citizens to extend their commitment to public education and to the future of our children by supporting our community's educators and the schools. Thank you, teachers, for all you do every single day. Jerry? And right behind them is our National School Nurses Day. Again, our teachers do a great job of having learning happen in every classroom, and our nurses do a great job of taking care of all the health needs and the scrapes and the bruises and the bumps and the headaches and the tummy aches that go on out there. So whereas Scottsdale Unified School District nurses work tirelessly to serve and motivate and care for our children, and the success of nurses is reflected in the support given to them by their community, the purpose of National School Nurse Day is to focus attention on the important role nurses play in our country and its future. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of the governing board, do hereby proclaim that the day of May 9th is National School Nurse Day in Scottsdale School District. I further encourage all citizens to extend their commitment to public education and to the future of our children by supporting our community's nurses, educators, and schools. So we have our head nurse, Tommy Burke, is supposed to be here to accept this recognition. Is Tommy here? If not, Dr. Sackos, on behalf of our nurses. Thank you. This has been a quite busy time of the year as we finish through things. Just a couple kind of milestones that we've had. This past week, we unveiled our e-coach. And what a spectacular event. You saw some photos of it earlier before the meeting, but we've actually taken a school bus that had served our students well, and it had driven lots of miles out there, and we decided to make it as an online technology platform for our students and our teachers. Our building services folks did an incredible job, our transportation folks did a credible job, and our technology folks all worked together to make that happen. And we're pretty proud of that e-coach. We're so proud that not only did it get great news coverage, we've had school districts from all over the country call us and ask us how we did that, because they want to emulate and they want to follow in our footsteps and try to come up with something so good. So kudos to our staffs for all the great things they've done to make that dream become a reality. So thank you guys for all your work out there. And as we thank folks for the great work they're doing, we did have our Scottsdale Honors Its Own celebration this past week. And in that celebration, we recognized our retirees. We recognized our individuals that have 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, and yes, 40 years of service to Scottsdale School District. Overall, our retirees are retiring with over 1,500 years of service to Scottsdale School District. So we have some incredible individuals that have wonderful experiences, and they're taking them with us. We will not forget them because we're inviting them back every year to volunteer in our classrooms again. So we want them coming back, and some said they'll come substitute for us. So we want to thank all of our employees that are doing a good job out there, and wish them well as they go on to their next journey in their life. Finally, I'd like to recognize our Student Advisory Board. They're going to be doing a presentation a little bit later this evening, but it's our inaugural board that started with us, and a few folks have kind of grown up with us. Brian has done a wonderful job leading that. Although he's going to miss us as he runs off to Duke, he will be able to stay in touch with those guys because they have a great Facebook page, and they are always communicating. So you will hear from them later, but I just wanted to recognize our Student Advisory Board for a job well done. You guys are taking care of business, you're serving on committees, and it's really nice to get a viewpoint and a voice of our students, the ones that we are serving. So guys, thank you for all you're doing, and we look to bigger and better things this next year with some new leadership. And we'll hear from you a little bit later tonight. Thank you, Madam President.
At this time, I would like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's 5-0.
Madam President, with that vote, I would like to proudly introduce some new principals and leadership to the Scottsdale School District. We have some of our new principals that you have just hired here with some of their family members. First, we have Susan Marshall Armstrong, who will be our new principal at Cheyenne Traditional School. Susan has great experience, and we're looking forward to her leading Cheyenne to that next level. Next, we have Alyssa Tarkington, who is going to be a great leader at Coronado High School. Alyssa. And just so I can officially put it on record, I have challenged Alyssa to take Coronado to become a early college high school for Scottsdale School District, and we are going to look at that model and make it happen. She's doing great work, and we're really excited. She's going to be able to come to us early and get to know that campus before the end of the school year, so we're very excited about that. Welcome, Melissa. Next, we have Miss Amy Uchaz, and she is going to be our principal at Pima Elementary School. Amy has great experience, and she's currently here just south of us in a little district serving, and she's coming, and she's going to do great things at Pima. Next, I would like to introduce one of our own, Mr. Art Velarde, who is going to be the new principal at Pueblo Elementary School. Art, you have big shoes to fill at Pueblo. And you're leaving big shoes to fill at Tavan, so thanks for your service there. And then finally, we have Mr. Mitch Von Nechten, who is going to be our new Executive Director of Secondary Schools. Mitch? We would like to welcome Mitch. Mitch is actually coming full circle. He was a teacher here in the district. His kids go to school here in the district. He's coming back to the district because he realized he left the best district in the state and he needed to come back. So Mitch, welcome, and we look to great things as we move forward with our secondary schools. Thank you, Madam President.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. We're very happy to have you on board. At this time, then, I'd like to make item 9Q. I did it right this time. I'd like to make a motion to approve item 9Q, approval of renewal of contracts with Pearson. The Pearson company pulled. So let's see. 9Q, approve the renewal of contracts. Item contract number 11129 Pearson Education would be pulled. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. That's 5-0. And next on the agenda is information discussion items, the Student Advisory Board.
Thank you, Madam President. We have Mr. Brian Dinner, who's going to be here this evening to give us a presentation regarding the wrap-up of the Student Advisory Board, and his mom, the official photographer, is going to be here to help us out.
Tomorrow's practice, next day is chaparral. Let her get in position first, right?
Or be careful.
Madam President Sneed, Superintendent Dr. Peterson, members of the board, and Mrs. Como, I'm pleased to announce that the fourth quarter has been tremendously successful for the Student Advisory Board. We had representation at the Budget Committee meeting, which is a great place for open discussion about what matters to everyone, which was also a great insight into the struggles you go through when deciding the budget. We had 2 members honored at the Scottsdale Charles Honors Banquet, a night which celebrated the educational successes in our community. We have just finished our application and selection process for next year. We've selected 15 new members from our largest pool of applicants yet. We have held our interim elections for officer positions who will serve until our second meeting of next year. I'd like to introduce them at this time. The interim president is Isabel Carter-Kahn. The interim vice president is Aditya Vijay. And the interim secretary is Tim Willits. Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have worked with the Scottsdale Education Association for the support of our teacher survey pilot, providing teacher anonymity as well as giving the teachers the option to withhold his or her own pilot results. We're proud to say we have 22 teachers participating in the pilot, not including all e-learning teachers. It is the recommendation of the Student Advisory Board to form a committee at the beginning of next year composed of 3 teachers, 3 students, and 3 administrators to review the results and decide future steps. I'd like to emphasize the point that it is our recommendation for our that any decisions regarding any expansion or change of use of results for the feedback must be made or recommended by that committee with equal representation. The SAB believes that this has been our greatest success to date and is confident that it will raise the level of education in our district. Before I continue, are there any questions about the survey at all? Anything? Okay. So now for the fun part, I get to tell you what our graduating seniors will be doing next year. Stephen Karras will be attending UC Berkeley, where he will be pursuing a major in computer science and electrical engineering. Rachel Angulo will be attending Arizona State University, where she will receive the Ames Scholarship and where she will be pursuing a major in psychology. Reed Blakey will be attending Northern Arizona University. Caroline Pryor will be attending the University of Arizona, where she received both the AIM Scholarship and the Arizona Alumni Association Scholarship, and where she'll pursue a major in political science and international relations. Tanner Wagner will be attending Barrett Honors College at Arizona State University, where he received the Regents High Honors Scholarship, and where he will be pursuing a major in accounting. Taryn Sheedy will be attending the University of Arizona, where she will pursue a major in elementary education, possibly coming back. Sammy Mian will be attending Barrett Honors College at Arizona State University as a Flynn Scholar. He plans to pursue a major in biomedical engineering. Olivia Brancotti will be attending Arizona State University, where she will be part of the LSP Leadership Program. She was named Saguaro's Charles Female Student of the Year. Jonna Hartenstein will be attending the University of Arizona, where she will pursue a major in biology. Bryce Patrick will be attending the University of Arizona, where she will pursue a major in communications. Daniel Douglas will be attending the University of Arizona, where he will pursue a major in political science. And I will be attending Duke University, where I plan to pursue a major in either political science or public policy. Now I have a few words before I hand over the microphone to Ms. Carter Kahn. 2 years ago, this school district took a chance. You embraced the idea of letting students be involved in decision making and policy shaping. You quit just talking about us, and you started talking with us. And most of all, you challenged us, you challenged yourselves, and you challenged the entire system to change. Now, 2 years after stepping into Dr. Forless's office in what seemed like a midsummer day's dream, I can tell you with confidence that this community has succeeded and will continue to succeed. Our communal victory is not only in the fact that we have had student input on the Mission, Vision, and Value Statement Committee, the Scheduling Committee, the Book Adoption Committee, the Code of Conduct Committee, and the Budget Committee. It is not only in the fact that we, the students, are now regularly engaged in conversation with administrators, nor even in the fact that we have managed to conduct a successful student-teacher survey pilot. No, our greatest success is none of those. It is you. Our greatest community success is that our school district practices what it preaches. It too challenges itself to be better. You did not accept the challenge of the SAB. You embraced it as an opportunity to grow and excel. I hear teachers, parents, and students all the time complaining about how the school has changed this or changed that, but they should just stop. Stop and thank you. For this is a lesson that surpasses the classroom. Never simply accept the status quo. Never quit challenging yourself to be better, and never stop learning how to be better. My involvement with our district has taught me to take the words, "That's just the way it is," as a dare to be better. There is always room for improvement in our personal lives and together as a community. This is what our school district does. You look at what I believe is the best school district in the state, and you say, how can we make it better? So I would like to say thank you for being different and being progressive. I am a product of this attitude, and I am a product of the SUSD. Things like the self-contained gifted program, the specialized engineering programming, the advanced calculus 3 math course, and obviously the student advisory board show how this district strives to improve the basic idea of a school district into something vastly better for students. For all of your efforts with the student advisory board, thank you. For taking that chance and overcoming all the obstacles we may have presented, thank you. To the amazing Dr. Thomas and Dr. Forless, for the countless hours you have put in to help make this midsummer day's dream into quite the success, thank you. And most importantly, to everyone in this room who cares enough to be here, cares enough about education to be here, thank you. Thank you for my education, thank you for listening to students, and thank you for making Scottsdale Unified School District the best now and well into the future. With no further ado, I am proud to hand off this microphone, and with it the leadership and the future of the SAB, to Miss Isabel Carter Kahn. Isabel, when I first saw you discussing with Dr. Peterson at one of the office hours, I knew you'd be a perfect fit for the SAB, as someone who would challenge that status quo and fight for student representation. I am confident that the future of the SAB is in incredibly capable hands. So congratulations.
as Brian just said, I'm Isabel Carter-Khan. I'm also from Chaparral. I'd just like to say I'm really excited next year to continue working on our projects that we've started this year, such as the teacher survey, and to continue to work on projects to try to improve the school district. And I know I have very big shoes to fill, but I thank you for your support. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and it has just been a pleasure to work with you this year. And make sure you give me your mom's email address. I have a picture. I'll send it to you. Thank you so much. Next on the agenda is the SUSD Science Instructional Materials Adoption. Oh, did I miss him? No. Okay, well, we can. The science instructional materials next? Okay. We're just going to switch B and C. Yeah, energy initiatives. Presentation on SUSD energy initiatives and cost savings.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I am delighted to introduce one of our very own, Mr. Jordan Hall, who is kind of that man behind the curtain on Oz with the smoke coming out and all those things. People never see him, but they know what he does because he keeps the air conditionings running. He turns them on when we need them turned on, when we forgot to tell him we needed them turned on. And he takes care of business every single day to make sure that 26,000 students and 1,700 teachers are in well-lit, comfortable, climate-controlled classrooms, and he saves money doing it. So, Jordan, you're one of a kind. Go for it.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Good evening, Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Peterson, Mrs. Como. My name is Jordan Hall, as Dr. Peterson just said. I'm the Energy Management System Supervisor. I'm in charge of the HVAC, energy management systems, and preventative maintenance in all departments. Dr. Peterson has requested that I present on the energy initiatives we have employed here at the district, primarily the performance contracting and solar operations. On our agenda, we're going to be covering first performance contracting, then our existing operational solar systems, and our new solar update on the construction that we have going on. Our first performance contract or energy efficient upgrade was at Desert Mountain High School and Mountainside Middle School. We installed a new 550-ton high efficiency chiller, and this chiller is really state of the art. It was pretty much the first one in the country, I believe, that we got, and it uses magnets instead of for magnetic levitation instead of bearings in the machine, so it's really state of the art, and that makes it very high efficient. We replaced two old chillers that were really what I call energy hogs. They consumed a lot of energy. We also added high efficient variable frequency drives and pumps, and this is all being controlled by a new energy management system. And then we also added new lighting in the classrooms and motion detectors. These graphs represent the consumption and cost at Desert Mountain High School, Complex, and Kiva. As you can see, we have significant savings from 2008, 2009, all the way till now. This table shows the kilowatt hour reduction for each year and school, and then the combined value. As you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, we have a combined energy reduction of 4,660,253 kilowatt hours, or 4.6 gigawatt hours. This is the avoided cost for Desert Mountain High School Complex and Kiva. It's done yearly, as you can see, and it shows Desert Mountain avoided cost, Kiva's avoided cost, and the natural gas cost savings for both complexes. And as you can see again in the lower right-hand corner, that amount is $668,904. The next energy efficient upgrade or performance contract we did was Chaparral High School. We added 29 new high efficient heat pumps in the library. We put all new controls in the library and the northern section of the school, and we put new lighting controls and motion detectors in the school. Again, we have a Chaparral High consumption versus cost. As you can see, we've reduced consumption every year, but our cost continues to go up, and that's mainly due to the utility increases, or is due to the utility increases. Again, we have a kilowatt hour reduction table by year. As you can see, we reduced every year with a total reduction as compared to the 2008-2009 at 4.4 million kilowatt hours. Our avoided cost, again, as you can see at the bottom right-hand corner, is $505,871. The next performance contract we entered was multiple schools. We have Anasazi, the Desert Canyon Complex, Copper Ridge Complex, Arcadia, Saguaro, Coronado. And what we did there is we added 2 new of the 550-ton high-efficient magnetic bearing chillers, the cooling towers, all new pumps, all new controls for all of the fan coils and all of the air conditioning units at that at Desert Canyon. I'm sorry, that was the only school we did a complete renovation. The other schools we just did some adds of lighting controls and exterior lighting. That is the combined consumption and cost. As you can see, we've reduced every year, and this is from 09-010 because we entered into this contract later. It's I believe our 3rd performance contract. Again, we have the table of kilowatt hour reduction. We reduced about 3.6 million kilowatt hours, and our cost savings, or avoided cost, is $440,131. The last performance contract we entered was for 4 schools: Redfield, Sequoia, Laguna, Cochise. And what we did there is we replaced over 200 of our older heat pumps and then replaced them with high efficient heat pumps and cooling towers. We put all new energy management controls. We did lighting controls and exterior lighting. Again, we had the motion detectors, and we tied into the HVAC systems for a setback. One of the things we did add on that performance contract was what they call energy dashboards, and it gives us the ability to look at real-time data as it happens throughout the day and compare it to the past. As you can see, we have different values, and then we have the daily graph. We did that also, added those for 5 high schools. We just got substantial completion on this project last month, so we don't really have any significant savings data at this point. This is performance contracting results. What I show is the cost averted for each complex per year and our yearly payment per year. And then our deviation, our combined savings, we ended up on the plus side of $64,458 of avoided cost. And that's really significant if you think about we had all this equipment for really no money out of pocket. I have an analogy. We'll see how it works, but my boss, John Muir, drives a truck. He calls it Big Red, and it's a big Ford F-250, and it's a gas hog, I guess is a nice way to put it. And so what we did, if we look at that truck as being a classroom, and this truck had a bad engine, had oil leaks, and you name it, it was barely staying alive. And then we took Dr. Peterson's Prius engine and put it into that truck without losing any capability. You know, just like in a classroom, we didn't lose any HVAC or lighting. We basically increase the longevity of that truck doing the truck type duties that it needs to do. And the kicker is, at some point, you will take that savings in fuel costs, pay for that new engine, and at some point, 5, 10, 12 years, the money will be coming back to you. So there's my analogy.
And for the record, my Prius goes faster than Big Red.
For our first existing solar, I guess I should say, we have solar at the Scottsdale School District. We're becoming the model for for solar power at schools, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. The first project we did was a 380 kilowatt rooftop array at Coronado. Dr. Peterson worked very hard to get this pushed through and battled with the Corporation Commission, and I believe this was the first one in the state. And so it opened the doors for everyone. And you know, there's a lot of other schools that have been able to latch on. This is Desert Mountain High School. It's an 875 kilowatt array. This is looking down from the auditorium. This is a close-up of a photovoltaic cell. And this is looking down at the music building at Desert Mountain. This is Chaparral High School aerial. It's a 721 kilowatt array. Copper Ridge aerial, 500 kilowatt array. And then we have a ground level shot of Copper Ridge, which I like because it shows the different angles at which you can employ the PV cells. Another thing we're doing is shade structure. This was the first one that we've done. It's at Arcadia. This is looking, I believe that's southeast at Arcadia. And this is the other side looking north, and it runs that long parking lot. This is a Saguaro rooftop solar. It's a 296 kilowatt array. And I put this picture in basically because I'm looking across at the 100 building at Saguaro, and this represents to me that we are having no impact on visuals for neighbors, anything. It's hidden. This was a Tavon rooftop, a 13.2 kilowatt array that just got initialized last month, and that was donated by SRP. And then all of these jobs are on solar power purchase agreements, and what I've shown is what the cost per kilowatt hour is locked in for, I believe it's 15 or 20 years, and compared to the average utility cost per kilowatt hour in 2012. So for each solar kilowatt hour we produce, as you see on the right side, you're doing better than 27%. I think the best is 32% there at Saguaro as compared to the utility. So for every kilowatt hour, you're saving money as compared to the utility from solar. A new venture that has already started is our shade structures, a 5.5 megawatt total addition. Desert Mountain Solar Shade Structures, a 1,200 kilowatt array. It's really big. And that's Chaparral's. It's a 991 kilowatt array. It is online and operational. It's another view. And here's just the rest of the PV projects that we have for solar shade structures that are under construction will be completed, I believe, at the end of the summer. That will complete the 5.5 megawatts. And I believe the total megawatts for our district at that time will be 8.5 to 9 megawatts. This is the current total solar output year to date. Coronado lifetime output, as you can see, is 1.5 million kilowatt hours. If you see, obviously the ones that have been in place and are bigger have more output. But see at the bottom, our total is 7,115,820 kilowatt hours. And those solar output EPA correlations are equal to 4,907 metric tons of CO2 reduced. It's like taking 926 vehicles off the road for a year. It's enough power to power 610 homes for a year, and it's same as reducing 26.8 rail cars of coal burned. And that's the end of my presentation. I didn't know if you had any questions.
A comment. Thank you. Wow, this is
Pleasure.
incredible.
Dr. Meyer?
Thanks. Oh, you're leaving, and I was going to ask you a question.
I'm sorry.
I hate when that happens. So, on the, well, a couple questions. Is the chiller at Desert Mountain solar?
No.
Okay.
That's not the solar chiller I showed. That project is, I believe, on hold at this point.
Does that do the financing issue?
Yes, I'm meeting with the bank tomorrow on that, and they're resurrecting that. The panels are in place. They got to put the piping in there. The chiller's actually on site. It's an absorption chiller. They want to get the project finalized, so they're working to make that happen.
Okay. And then you gave the kilowatt hour savings for a couple of the schools. Do you know district-wide, and the number, I think from 4 years ago, we'd saved 1.2 million kilowatt hours or something like that. This is obviously much more. Where, do you know that number of total kilowatt savings for the district?
Not off the top of my head, but I can get that to you.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Just because down at the legislature, they're always saying, oh, you guys aren't doing anything. And, you know, this is an example of how, without using any taxpayer dollars,
Right.
we have implemented programs that are going to save our schools millions of dollars over the life of these programs. And beyond that, you know, after that, we own this stuff, right?
Yes.
So those solar panels and all those structures become district property, and then the energy cost goes to zero for us.
That's correct.
So that's a great deal for the district, a great deal for the taxpayers, and the dollars that we save, we can actually spend in the classrooms on our teachers and our kids.
Definitely.
And so, and then the next question is, we have our total kilowatt hour usage, then how much of that is provided by solar, I guess, would be the other part of the equation that would be good to know, to say, you know, 10% or 15% or 20% of
Sure.
all the power we use in the district is,
Sure.
is
I
solar
can break
power.
that down.
And then lastly, I mean, our kids, are they able to tap in any way into the curriculum with the solar on campus? I know at Arcadia there was a program, but I don't know about the other campuses.
I don't know about the actual curriculum programs, but I know we have kiosks on site, but I don't know if any teachers developed it yet into their curriculum or not.
Madam President, Board Member Meyer, several things. As Jordan said, every school that has solar installations has a kiosk, a video display in its lobby that shows what's being produced in real time, those things. Every single one of them you can access on the internet. You can see it live, you can get the data. But also there is curriculum we're starting to utilize in our classrooms. And this summer, there is an actual solar boot camp that is taking place. And we have teachers and some students that are going to attend that in California. And they will actually get a stipend for attending it. And then they will be bringing that curriculum back to Scottsdale schools to implement in our schools this next year.
Great. Well, obviously, great job. Again, this is a way that everybody has worked really hard to get programs in place that, you're right, I don't know that there's any other district that has been this forward-thinking and provided a way to impact, environmental impact, educate our kids, and put dollars in the classroom without spending any taxpayer dollars. So great job.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And to that point, Dr. Meyer, when I was at the science night for the Desert Mountain Learning Community, they had some of the IB students were using the kiosk and the online information, and it was nice to see some of their critical thinking skills, because they were going in during break, over winter break, and looking at the energy consumption. And then all of a sudden one day it was really warm and there was nothing, and there must be something wrong, because it just went down to zero. And so it was really nice to see the students' presentation and how they're utilizing it. Okay, thank you very much. The next information discussion item then will be the SUSD Science Instructional Materials Adoption.
Thank you, Madam President. As Dr. Karen Benson comes up to present this, I just would also be remiss if I didn't recognize Rick Freeman and his folks, because they really build all this, put it in, and then Jordan and his folks operate it. So it's a great collaboration between multiple departments to make everything come together and work. And the nice thing is, it does work. Dr. Benson.
Good evening again, Madam President, governing board members, and all here this evening. Tonight I have the pleasure of introducing our Janie Kaufman, lead curriculum specialist in science in Scottsdale. Janie's going to share the work of our Science Adoption Committee this year, as they've recommended materials for the science courses that will not be impacted by the next generation science standards that'll be released yet later this week. You're going to notice in her presentation that the committee's recommendations include a small pilot for a one-to-one computer initiative, as well as an emphasis on web-based tech programs and probeware to support the changes in instruction that will be impacted and expected in the next generation science standards. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Janie to the podium to detail the recommendations from the committee. Ms. Janie?
Hi. Madam President, Governing Board, Dr. Peterson, and Sandra. Before I begin, I want to pass around one of the tools that we're recommending, and I just pulled up on the menu the effective tilt angle on solar panels. So and there were very many here, so. You've already seen it, but these little probeware tools are so easy for kids to actually take in their lab. It has cameras, it has microphones, and writing capabilities and such. And so those are the kinds of things that we're talking about adding to our actual curriculum material list. Oops, I have to do it this way, sorry. Okay, so the next generation science standards, a lot of people were calling it Common Core. In fact, they're giving it a name. They don't want it to be called Common Core because it is, even though coming through the same route as Common Core through Achieve, it is called Next Generation Science Standard. I was hoping to be able to show you a model, but it was delayed and delayed for lots of good reasons. And the draft is supposed to come out Friday. So we'll make that available for you to get your first glance, and it's actually available for public comment for 3 weeks. The second draft will come out in November after the election, and then the final will be February of 2013. So because it was delayed, we had to pause on a lot of our science. One reason it's delayed is because they wanted to make it easy for teachers to implement and know how they're integrating the English language, arts, and math Common Core into it. So when teachers look at the page with the science standard, they'll see those words, they'll see that the verbiage and the task and what kids are supposed to be able to do in English language, arts, and math are integrated right into the science. So the teachers will be relieved when they actually see that. They are more rigorous, greater depth of knowledge, very different than it is now. And one of the pieces that's really different is science and engineering practices, which will make us really take a look at the way we provide instruction in our classrooms. And teachers are going to need lots of help and support in looking at these new goals and how to use the tools. And we're excited about that because we have awesome teachers. We had to pause for the core classes, and I just want to remind you that our program we have right now is very successful. I'd like to thank our voters and thank the community, thank our administration, both present and previous administration, for supporting us as we started back in 2004 building our Science Center. I don't know how many of you have seen the Science Center at the warehouse. I think Dr. Meyer has. And so what we have are kits that are ready to be shipped to teachers when they order them, all ready to go with everything cut, everything ready. We even have a critter farm at Arcadia that Dr. Peterson was so kind a few years ago to make sure it had its own heating and cooling system after all the critters died one day in the summer. So teachers order critters, they come on Mondays, and they come in a special container, and so no more brown boxes with a smell accompanying it. The secretary says, "Who ordered this?" So we have really done a lot to make science not such an overwhelming task, especially for elementary teachers, and our scores show it. Of all districts our size, we are #1 in the state, and only small little districts like Cave Creek ever outperform us in like grade 4. So we're doing good things, and we want to stay that way and get to always be the best in the state. You've heard a lot about STEM. You've seen it in the newspapers. You've seen the robotics team's success. You've seen a lot of the results of our efforts. But Condoleezza Rice, a few months or a couple weeks ago or months ago, I can't remember now, it's kind of a blur, but her story was in the headlines about our nation at risk and how because of the deficits and gaps that our students have in science and math, it will really mean that our nation is at risk for security. So that was one thing. There are lots of reports that come out. But I was with one of the executives at DuPont in Indianapolis a month ago, and she said, "Janie, 30,000 of our 50,000 employees are ready to leave and retire, and we can't even get interviews. The ones we do have are not from the United States, and then when we start to negotiate seriously, the oil companies have already grabbed them up." So that's DuPont. Everybody knows about that, but we have that own issue right in our state of not being able to fill the jobs in the workforce. So the whole STEM issue is twofold. It's providing that kind of instruction within our schools and getting kids inspired and eager to go on in that field, and also filling the gap in the workforce place that needs so many people in the STEM field from every angle that you could think of as far as a job. Race to the Top monies, we will apply for those if we haven't already. I'm not sure if we have, but one of the stipulations of disseminating those funds is that we have to use Common Core, work with Common Core provided through a STEM initiative. And so everybody is aware of the need for more focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So as we decided to move forward, we said, well, we can go ahead with the courses outside the framework of next generation science standards. And we need technology tools and web-based instructional materials that will span all high school courses and to allow for differentiation and to get students working with the technology tools of the workplace and of college and university. So the last adoption was 2004, and you can imagine how things in biology and life sciences especially have changed, and we didn't have we still had Pluto back then. So lots continues to change in science, and if we do things the same way we always have and buy a 30-pound, $200 textbook, we'll be stuck with it till after 2020 for sure. The last capital equipment upgrade was in 1998. We're middle and high school, where we had the old technology and upgraded all to equal numbers of microscopes and balances and hot plates and the old things, glassware, all of that kind of thing. Some of the schools do have probeware that they've acquired bits and pieces. A teacher got a grant or the PTO helped buy it or something like that, but it's just hit and miss and all different combinations of the probeware. And we don't have computers in the classrooms for students to use to be able to do things effectively with it. So our recommendations are to pilot student individual computers and that one-to-one that Karen mentioned. And then on these, we would have loaded the text as a PDF, and ideally the student would always be using the online text with interactive labs and current up-to-date editions of the text. But if a student couldn't have internet access or their internet's down, internet goes down at my house too, so then they would have the text as a PDF on that computer, and they would be able to take the computer with them and use it in their work in high school. We want to go ahead and implement the use of web-based technology programs, specifically Discovery Education Streaming Plus, which we already have, and Explore Learning Gizmos, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a couple of minutes. And we'd like to start getting carts with computers, 18 per teacher per class, to allow for the work with these probes and to allow the differentiated work with the technology tools so that kids can be working together on different things and filling gaps and searching out things of interest and really getting inspired about learning science. So next year, what we would like to do is provide professional development and implementation for these high school electives. We would like to provide professional development and introduce the next generation science standards for all pre-K-12 teachers, including and at the same time that integration of English language arts and math so that it all makes sense. We would like to go ahead with adoption of the regular high school core courses next year, biology, chemistry, physics, and earth and space science, and other things that were on pause this year. And of course, things like AP chemistry or anything that the College Board is revising will wait until that is complete before we would get new materials. We'd like to adopt web-based technology next year for pre-K-8 and get them started. And the thing about these web-based platforms is that if something is currently at a certain grade level or targeted for a grade band, it can be flexible, and when we know the next generation science standards come out, they are grade level specifics. It will say something like you have to teach light and sound in first grade, whatever it does, then we'll be able to adjust within that. Then next year we want to have a transition plan for our Science Resource Center to be able to say, okay, this is what we have, and we need to upgrade these modules. We need to move this module from 4th grade to 3rd grade. We need to, say goodbye to this module, and we need to fill in the gaps of the new things and keep what we have and enhance it, revise it, and make it match next generation science standards. We do have to add that engineering component. There's an engineering strand pre-K-12, and we have to figure out how we're going to embed that engineering into our regular courses pre-K-12. So let's talk about gizmos just for a second. Coronado High School has been piloting gizmos and just have favorable things to say. Sammy Meehan, one of the student advisory board members who was on our science committee, said, I love gizmos. So it's highly interactive online simulation, and it has lots of research to back it up. I'd certainly be willing to provide any of that. It's the only product really with the rubber stamp of Robert Marzano and McCrell, and we have lots of research about it. And why do we use these computer simulations? Well, just like the probe title, how does the tilt affect the energy or the workings of the solar panels? We can't go up on the roof and move the solar panels around, or we can't really look at how the Earth rotates and revolves around the sun, and we really can't look inside a cell and see inner workings of electron transport and what have you. So what we can do with all of these gizmos is manipulate things that we can't really in the laboratory. So we can make those abstract topics much more concrete. And it can be just in time. This is when I need it, but I need more, so I can work on it more. Oh my goodness, I found out that I have a gap in this, and I never had this part of science in 4th grade, so I can go and do another module, another gizmo, and fill in that gap. Or I already know this stuff, so I can do an enriched version based on my interest. So, and kids get to choose, so that ownership piece will help with that inspiring that we want to create. Here are some types of gizmos, just going really fast. Those that can help with misconceptions and concept development, inquiry and manipulating variables, models. We can take them on field research projects, equipment and safety issues, skill development. Okay, so then we go to Discovery Streaming Plus, and I only have this one slide because you're already familiar with Discovery Streaming Plus, and the thing about both of these programs is that they have individual student accounts. They sign on at home or wherever they are. Parents can sign on. Teachers can give assignments. It grades. It manages. They can assign different video clips, compare, have writing prompts. Lots of flexibility for meaningful homework for students and parent involvement, and also be able to keep students interested in what they're doing. There are two companies that we would like to have as being our adopted companies for the probeware. One is Vernier, and Vernier is more upper level and also in colleges and universities, and is more of a simple little computer. I mean, not simple, but it's small. It's smaller. I don't have an example of a Vernier probe here, but they're smaller. That's not the probe. This is the unit. This is the like little computer, and the probes are all the things that you put in the USB ports and do whatever it is you need to do. And this is the one that you see right here that I passed around to you, Pasco. This was our committee of teachers, administrators, parents, Sammy as the student, and then I know you can't see this very well. You were sent this information, but of all the courses that we have, we felt like we could only act upon the ones that are highlighted in green. Okay, and if you look at zoology botany, it's like $114,000. Well, Algebra 1 book costs $94. The book for Zobot and the book for HPA are $200 a piece, plus 10 to 12% shipping. Anyway, a lot, yeah. So our recommendations would be to order web-based technology programs and provide the professional development for August implementation. Order ebook and individual student computers for human physiology and anatomy. That would be our target course for August implementation. And the reason we chose human physiology and anatomy, we had 4 different options. That is a course that is every high school, and lower numbers of registrants than like zoology botany, which makes it more affordable for us to start small. And then we could order traditional textbooks for courses without materials, and transition to individual student computers as soon as budgets allow. And order the probeware and provide equipment equalization 1 course at a time, so that all of our high schools have appropriate numbers for each course, and that would be over a 3-year period, because we want teachers to have more experience using the probeware before we make decisions about what to order, and we want to start that in June with our professional development. And you've already seen the Summer Institute flyer. Certainly invite any of you to come participate even for 20 minutes with a probeware. Dr. Meyer, you've done that before. You've been in some of our workshops, and so you can kind of see what it's like. We want to then, during our early release days that are district days in the fall, we want to continue with this professional development for our teachers, and based on the different needs, provide different options for them. This is the course enrollment. Last year we did have AP biology at every high school, but Coronado and Saguaro are smaller, so we typically have that every other year. So they don't have it this year. And that's one reason we went to our priority 1 for our computer rollout. Budget information, this is all capital override dollars. Thank you to the voters, or we would be having the same old biology book from 2004. The Discovery Stream Plus is really for all courses, and so it's under subscription currently with technology override dollars. And I would be, this just basically says what I already said, that we have to really work on getting kids interested in these careers. Almost all the jobs that are going to be available and that are available are related to STEM. So K-12 education has a big task. And so now I'd be happy to answer the questions you have. I'm sure you do have questions.
Dr. Meyer.
Thanks, great presentation. So what happens with, what stays in place that we have in place, like all the FOSS stuff? Does that continue to stay in place and we still are funding the consumables for all those things?
Yes, and Arizona is a lead state with Next Generation Science Standards, and I'm actually on that committee, so I've seen them, and I kind of know, even though I can't talk about it, it helps me plan. And Arizona, as a lead state, is expected to adopt the Next Generation Science Standard as soon as possible after the release, and then there'll be approximately a 2-year transition period to give districts time to make all the changes. So there wouldn't be any new assessment until at least 2015, and probably not the same year as the park rollout. So it will give us time to make those changes. But in Scottsdale, we like to get on board right away, and we like to do the new and better things for our kids. So FOSS is fully, they've already done revisions. Their new teacher guides will have engineering components. They'll have embedded notebooking, the science and engineering practices. So for some of our kits, all we'll have to do is buy the new teacher guide. Some will have to maybe get a few extra materials to enhance the kit to meet the new standard. Some will be completely new, and they will work with us on a transition plan for K-8. And I think that's what I'm trying to hold on, keep working till I get that done. So we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That was a huge investment. I know that the survey for satisfaction of the Science Center went out to teachers today from our Science Resource Center, and we have the results from the last few years. And teachers, you know, when hundreds of elementary teachers and you get one, like, I wanted to be able to keep my own kit all summer, is the only complaint that you get. I think we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, because we made a pretty big investment in those
We did.
kits. And so they'll stay.
They'll stay.
And then, other than the books you've listed here that we're going to purchase and these units, a lot of the stuff's web-based.
A lot of the stuff is web-based. The thing that is, and the only thing as far as textbooks that still on the plan needing to be taken care of is regular biology, regular chemistry, regular physics, regular earth and space science, which we really can't look at any new materials until after the next gen comes out. For example, in the framework that is the basis for the Next Generation Science Standards, biology has a lot more about neurology, a lot more about the brain, a lot more about climate change, waves, energy. So we have to see all those pieces and where they fit in before we can actually look at new materials for those courses.
And for the books we're purchasing, are there online, how, you know?
How
so
this
we don't
works,
get,
yes.
Yeah, so we don't have the same problem where our books are.
Right, and let me just go back a second to that budget and say that those dollars estimates are from the original proposals from the publisher. We have not talked with them, we have not tried to negotiate. That's their original offer to us. So I fully expect that when we go back and say, well, we really want to proceed with this, that we'll be able to get some better options. Right now, they still want everybody to buy the big hard book, and then with that you get the complimentary e-book access and the PDF and all of those things. Well, what if we don't want the big book? Well, you save 10% or 20%. So they still have a handle on that, and we can try to negotiate that. But we still need some hardback books. I mean, even with our one-to-one idea in the computer plan for HPA, somebody's computer might fall in their swimming pool, or they might lose it, or we have to have books available for people if the computer's being repaired, whatever it happens to be. So we still need books. And it's just, we don't know exactly how many we need. This is a new journey for us to move this direction.
And last question on books. Some of our teachers don't the books become paperweights? Like hold my son's door open when we have the windows open, and they never get used. So, are we working? I mean, you know, my question is, why are we buying books if the teacher's not going to use them? I mean, they're obviously learning. Our students are learning the materials, just not from the books that we've bought. So how do we ensure that we're not buying books that aren't going to be used?
And remember, the book is an instructional tool that is part of the teacher's collection of tools and tricks to help students understand the content. And there are some teachers who are very dependent on or very reliant on the textbooks, and others who have developed their own materials over time, and we have not said you have to use the textbook 80% of the time or anything like that. In fact, there are a lot of reasons why we shouldn't do that, but professional development is essential as we work with the teachers in looking at instruction. They know their content, they're highly qualified, they're appropriately certified, but one very excellent teacher and department chair said to me, and she wouldn't even care if I told you her name, but she said, Janie, I want to do all these things. I want to have kids doing different things in my room using all these things. She said, but I don't know how. I don't know what it looks like. I've only been in the classrooms I grew up in, and I don't know how to do that. So somebody's going to have to help me with that. So that's what coaches and mentors do. We're going to ask the companies that we buy things from to come and actually model in classrooms with kids, with the teachers and the students, so they can see what happens. And one thing that I wish I could be in all those classrooms to help, but that's actually what we have to develop and build, is a mentoring system where we're able to provide the support once they learn it so that we can help them do it and be successful with it.
I guess the question is, it doesn't matter to me if the teacher uses the book or not, but if they're not going to use it, I'd rather not buy it. So do we talk with our teachers before we?
Well, we are, and the zoology botany teachers, for example, have said, the $114,000 is a lot of money. We'll be willing to have class sets, and even though we know we can't have one-to-one computers, if we'll be able to use the carts sometimes, and we have class sets, we'll wait. So, and we can actually propose that to any of the other groups of teachers as well. Our teachers are veteran. They're not all veteran. We have new teachers, but what I mean is they've been here with us. They're happy in Scottsdale. They'll be willing to work with us, and they'll be willing to take risks. They've all demonstrated that as they've worked really hard on this end of course assessment work and other things that we've been doing. So we can certainly propose that.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions. When you talk about individual computers, will these be owned by the student, rented? Or how does that work?
No, but I think Karen should answer.
Okay.
If a question was posed about the one-to-one computer initiative, I promised I'd come and stand beside Janie. As we've talked about in prior curriculum presentations, none of our adoption committee work happens in isolation anymore. All of it happens in conjunction with the technology long-range plans of this district and the tools and programs recommended by our technology standardization committee. So we've worked closely with Tom Clark and Kyle Ross, and the reason we want to start small with the one-to-one computer initiative is because we know any place this has taken root and worked has been very thoughtfully rolled out and has been a pilot situation. So they're working to recommend the tool or the product that we use, the guarantee warranty system that we have, the orientation that would involve for our students, the insurance that would be involved in that as well as our first tiny little pilot program. And we purposely selected a course that happens at all of our courses, or makes at all of our high schools. So the pilot would impact 5 teachers and 5 courses, or 1 course at 5 locations across Scottsdale. So
It's actually 6. I just found out Chaparral has 2 HPA teachers.
there we go, 6 teachers with 1 course that makes it all of our high schools. So I just met actually with Tom Clark and Kyle Ross again yesterday with the governing board's approval next month. that we will even be further along in our plans about what that looks like with our one-to-one computer initiative, what the tool looks like, what the warranty looks like, what the insurance looks like, and the orientation of our kids and parents. Does that help?
Okay, so I'm just trying to get my head around how much technology we're buying and for which classes. E-books are for,
Okay, the e-books, for HPA, we would buy e-books with a few extra hardback books. With the other books that we buy in every situation, except for some of the upper level like astrophysics, and which we are pausing, although they've selected the text, there is not an e-book available. But in most cases, there's a hardback book, and with that purchase comes an e-book.
okay, so when you say an e-book, that's access
Yes.
to a PDF.
And our kids have it, they have it now in most of their courses. They have online codes to get to those e-books.
So we're not talking about a separate piece of equipment?
No,
Okay,
no.
I just wanted
Good
to
question.
make
Good
sure.
question.
The other thing, when you talk about the classroom computers, why can't the individual, are we talking about a different class from the individual computers?
Yes, the one-to-one computer, those are about $500 a piece, and so for the student enrollment to fit our budget, because this is not the technology override budget, this is capital override curriculum budget, and we would be able to buy the one-to-one computers just for those students enrolled in HPA. That's separate, that's one thing. Now, the rest of the science teachers, to be able to use these tools in their classroom and differentiate within the classroom, need the cart with 18 computers on it, and we want to get at least 2 per high school, 3 at Arcadia, 4 at Desert Mountain. So between 2 and 4 at each high school, depending on how many teachers they have, 7 at Coronado, 15 at Desert Mountain teachers. So to be able to share these carts, they'll check them out, and each cart will have 18 that the teachers will be able to use in their classroom.
Now, the individual computers, do they come loaded with specific, like, science textbook software?
That's part of the talk with Kyle Ross and Tom Clark, is that we will have our district standard as what is on every computer, and then it'll almost be like, think of going to the bookstore a couple of years down the road, or I don't know how long, but checking out your computer with all your textbooks on it based on your schedule. So this will have the HPA book on it. We haven't had talk yet about whether we can load the books from their other courses onto it or not. So that's another piece of that discussion.
Okay, and how does this all fit in with BYOT?
Well, BYOT, we talked, I was in the meeting with Karen and Kyle on Monday. You know what? I don't want to answer that one.
I'm happy to answer that one. It fits perfectly with it, because when we have that tool, when those kids from that course have that tool, that tablet then or that laptop becomes part of their BYOT plan, because it can be a number of things that we're asking them to bring their own technology with or to, whether it's phones or all kinds of tools. And so that's a piece of it. It's one component of it that we're starting small. Does that make sense? Does that respond to your question?
Okay, but the actual individual computers belong to the district?
Yes.
And they will stay with the HPA?
No.
They stay with the
They stay with the student in HPA only. All of the others on the cart stay in the department.
Okay,
The students in HPA will check out their computer, and they'll get to take it home with them, and
Okay, I guess I'm thinking of the next year.
Oh.
So at the end of the year, the students check the computers back in, the HPA
Yes,
stuff, it'll all
yes.
be there and cleaned up for the next.
yes.
I think you answered all my questions.
Okay.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Okay.
The
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next information discussion item is consideration of adoption of the Booster Club Handbook.
Dr. Jeff Thomas is going to lead the discussion regarding the adoption of our Booster Club Handbook. He's been doing a lot of great work with our boosters in our community, along with Mr. Cliff McKenzie. And I think we've made some very good progress regarding what we would like to look at in the future in dealing with all the activities that happen outside of the school.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Peterson, Sandra. We had sent you the first draft in its entirety because the best way to work on the document is to work on the document. So I didn't put a PowerPoint, no presentation, anything there. What I'd like to do is take a few minutes and get some feedback from the Governing Board, and also make sure that if there's anything that we need to continue to look at, we can do so. Our plan is to do two things. First is, after we get your feedback tonight, take that feedback and incorporate it into our draft to improve it. But also then we have a committee that's going to be working on the language as well. But we didn't want them to try and start out with and draft the language from scratch. We needed to start somewhere. So the document that you have before you is a combination of looking at multiple Booster Club documents, not only across the state but across the country. I've included models from places such as Texas, which have longstanding histories of Booster Club interest and challenges. But also we incorporated what current policy that does exist within the document, and we had found that some of that policy is scattered here, there, and everywhere, but there is no single place that has booster information. So that is the first draft for you, and at this time I'd like to take any questions, comments, or concerns that you have regarding our first draft, with the idea that we're going to make some edits and we will bring back the document for board approval in June.
Mr. Brown?
Quite a document. You know, the only thing that I constantly get confused about with this in the conversation is the word sponsor. I mean, so the sponsor is going to regulate the guy that's sponsoring a club. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If I could, Madam President, Mr. Brown, sponsor is the school staff person who sponsors the activity or the club.
But a sponsor is also a guy that says, "I'd like to sponsor your club with and buy the uniforms."
Okay. So if I could, that would not be part of our definition of a sponsor. Sponsor is going to be the employee who has the role of working with the club or activity that is there to represent and oversee the program on behalf of students. As far as how the boosters want to define somebody like that, that's going to be up to them. But for our purposes, a sponsor is the staff person who has that role and responsibility.
I think we would define it as a sponsor, as Jeff said, versus a financial supporter.
Or a donor.
And we would be very clear about a donor or a financial supporter versus a sponsor.
I would just want to make sure that the public understands. You know, it's not me, it's what the world hears.
Sure. Well, and thank you, Mr. Brown. This is part of why we wanted to get your feedback and your thoughts from your vantage point as well. So we've got that noted.
Dr. Meyer?
So let's continue with the conversation we started a little bit earlier. So we've got our sponsor, and the sponsor is the district employee. In some cases, is that sponsor paid? So if it's a sponsor of the, and we can rap dancing club on campus, does this apply? And then they have a booster club. So is that sponsor paid or not paid?
Madam President, Dr. Meyer, it depends on the nature of the activity. It will be both paid and unpaid. As an example, if you are a student government sponsor, that is, there's a small stipend that goes with that, so they are paid. If you are a club after school that doesn't have a stipend, but you're doing work and you have some sort of booster club support system, then you may be unpaid.
And does that exist in the district?
It does.
So the next question is what we were talking about earlier. So how, you know, in the case where the sponsor makes decisions about who can be in the club, because that decision is made by either, it could be drama, whether you get into a play, could be athletics, whether you get on a team, and could be band where only the talented or most talented kids get to go on a trip. How do you, under this model, ensure that when decisions are made, there isn't the potential for choosing students based on their parents' booster club activity?
Well, if I could, Madam President, Dr. Meyer, the only way to get 100% assurance of that is to not allow booster clubs. So absent of that, then you have to create the best next step, which says that we're going to try and minimize the ability for people to overstep their boundaries and get into places of influence that are inappropriate and are conflict of interest on behalf of our employees and our students. Here's part of our dilemma. Right now, we have very little of any type of mechanism whatsoever to control booster club behavior. We do, however, have the mechanism to control staff behavior and student behavior. By extension and creating of these guidelines, what we're asking is in this process over the next couple of years to change the culture and take the booster clubs from independent operators to become partners with our district, much like our PTOs and our site councils. In order to do that, then if you look at some of the guidelines and the language that we've put in there, I think we've put in some safeguards. So one of the examples is you cannot, one of the recommendations is you cannot tie a student having to raise his or her own money dedicated for the student for the purpose of participating in the activity. So for example, if I want to be part of this particular program, and if the sponsor in the past has said you need to go raise $500 and the parent writes a check for $500, the idea is we need to stop that practice and write it instead of dedicated to the student for the school activity that's a required activity to put it in the general pool. That's the first thing. The second thing is to look at each of the Constitution and bylaws for booster clubs and talk about what are the requirements of membership. Because some of these places will actually say you need to fork out $2,000 to be a member. Well, that's where we think we're going to be able to influence and say, you know what, you shouldn't have a significant financial contribution for the sole purpose of becoming a member of the booster club. But right now, we have no mechanism whatsoever to have that conversation or make that control. We believe by helping with the guidance of the bylaws and the coaching in that, we're going to be able to change that practice.
Ms. Peterson?
Okay, wait, I just want to go back to two things. The financial contribution part of it, I mean, in fairness to the booster, I know everything we're doing here. We certainly don't want to diminish or discourage any of their efforts. These are hardworking people trying to enhance our programs. With the financial contribution, I don't know that it's necessarily always a, yep, you want to be part of the club, give us $2,000. At least in my experience, it's a very long list. Oh, you'll be going to this camp, you get your warm-up suit, you get, I mean, so you are paying for something. You're not just paying to get your son on the court, basically. I mean, so I think we need, I guess I'm worried when we start kind of talking money as far as dictating what we think they should be doing, or do you know what I mean? There's an independence there.
Absolutely, Madam President, Ms. Peterson, absolutely. That's part of our dilemma. We don't want to dictate how they spend the money as long as it's done appropriately. Right now, however, we've got folks doing things that, quite frankly, are keeping me personally and our entire department busier than we should be by well-intended people not having an understanding of what the rules of the game are because we haven't really set the rules of the game consistently and monitored those rules consistently. So in this process, we're trying to create a fair and appropriate place. Now, here's what we know. The work that we have done so far by having these general meetings with booster attendees, with teachers, with coaches, with principals and athletic directors, we've already had very supportive attendance and feedback on the progress that we're making. And part of where your draft is today is based upon much of what they asked us to put together because they feel like they don't have the guidance either. We're not in any way believing that we have it perfect, but we think we have a good starting point. And we believe that we'll learn along the way and improve it. But if we do nothing, this problem will not get better, it will get worse.
Oh, and I'm certainly not advocating for nothing, and I'll let it go back to you, Erica, and it was actually your turn. My point was more, again, I hate to diminish or discourage their efforts. I certainly don't want us to start getting in their business, in their books, in their finances. That's a mistake for everyone. I guess the only thing I would like to see is maybe more involvement by the athletic director or site administration. That seems like the next level of checks and balances, where people really can go and they don't feel there'll be any recourse whatsoever. Or you can go and say, you know, whatever, they can just go and talk with them. Go back to you.
Yeah, Madam President, Mrs. Peterson, we absolutely agree. In fact, one of the things that we're going to be asking our athletic directors and our administrators to do is to be more engaged, to be more involved, specifically to be much more of a liaison, independent of the coaches. We agree.
Well, and I guess to that point, I mean, there's at least two parts to this equation. One, this is how the boosters are supposed to interact, but then we need, if we're calling them sponsors, but are, you know, coaches, our drama teachers, our band teachers, there needs to be some separation, and I think this will be good for them as well, between and there needs to be guidelines for them. So when they go to the boosters with a request, they can make that request, but they shouldn't be there for a vote. They shouldn't know how it's paid for. There has to be some separation between the money and the boosters and that sponsor, because that doesn't necessarily lead to problems, but it leads to perceptions that the sponsor, as we're going to call them, may be influenced by decisions that are made by certain boosters. And when booster clubs, and it's great that a lot of that's spelled out in here, but you know, it's unclear when you become a member of the PTO or how that works, what your role is as a parent or as a, you know, as a booster works. It's unclear to a parent when your kid makes the team and what your involvement is and what you should be notified of by your booster club. So for instance, is there a requirement to notify all boosters of when there's a meeting so you can go to the meeting and hear what's discussed? Are the meetings to be open and transparent? Should there be some kind of published budget that all members see and the athletic director or whoever we're going to designate on the campus to review? And what's the administrative responsibility as it relates to approving that? Because and I know there are potentially IRS changes that are going to occur relative to booster clubs, but at some point the district may become responsible for some of those budgeting type issues and how those dollars are spent. And I'll give you an example, but when boosters raise money and send kids, say, to a tournament that costs, you know, plane fare, I'd say it costs $1,200, well, is that a taxable item? Is that if I haven't paid anything for that trip and yet I gain plane tickets and hotel rooms and things like that, the IRS may find that as being, you know, who has to issue a 1099 as income to someone for that. I don't know whether that's going to happen or not, but there's discussion surrounding that. So I think this is a step to get our boosters and our district prepared. And you're welcome to respond, Cliff, and I'll stop talking because I put like 20 questions in one.
No, I totally agree with you, Madam President, board members. What I've taken from our two meetings, and Carla Partridge also should be recognized for being a part of this, part of our group, that our booster people who attended those meetings are looking for guidance. And they've said that to us in two meetings. So they want guidance and they want to do the right thing. And there should be a separation from coaching and boosters. And saying that our ADs, and as well as myself, we should attend some of those meetings sometimes so that we can help with questions that pop up. But more importantly, what we're getting ready to create with that booster liaison will really help with the process.
Now, when you say booster liaison, is that the same as the sponsor?
No.
No. Okay.
There's a piece in here that's just going to be the tip of the iceberg, and once we have it created, we'll have a better idea of how it's going to operate. But we have proposed to this ad hoc committee that we've been working with over the last couple of months that we create a booster council that has representatives from all 5 learning communities. We'll have an athletic director representative, a principal representative, and also middle school representation, and at least 2 parents from each learning community. And we're going to meet on a regular basis to be a liaison and conduit between the district trying to put this mechanism in place and provide support and resources, and what's happening in our schools and our learning communities. They're very excited by that opportunity. We were pleasantly surprised how quickly they jumped aboard. So during the first year of implementation of the booster handbook, we're going to have this body who's going to essentially oversee and communicate how we're doing. Right now, we don't have anything that exists. So between the two, between the booster council and the document, we think we have a nice starting point to reshape the culture in a way that's going to work for everybody, because as you heard from Mr. McKenzie, this is about well-intended people who are trying to do everything they can to support our programs, but right now we don't have a systemic way to support. And unfortunately, then we're putting out fires because we don't have that system.
Well, and some of our well-intended boosters, who I'm totally supportive of, I mean, they bring millions of dollars into our district every year, are potentially putting themselves at risk. They don't understand what it means to be on a booster board and their legal obligations if things go awry and they're on the board and they have some liability, and I don't think.
And also, Dr. Meyer, the AIA will be forming a booster club summit soon. And Dr. Peterson and I were at the superintendent committee of 12 not too long ago, and we're probably one of the only districts that are really looking at this issue, which they applaud us for. So now AIA is going to look at this as well in terms of all schools, inviting them to a summit to speak on this.
And to that point, ASU has a Center for Nonprofit, and they offer master's program in nonprofit administration. I think that we should bring somebody in that's an expert in nonprofits and have them help some of the boosters, because it's the same problem when you get a new president in all the time. They don't understand their obligations. They don't understand that their actions have to be approved by the corporation committee. They don't understand the ramifications if they don't follow the rules, and they're severe. And also, one of the things that I would like to try to figure out in the guidelines, what do we do if a nonprofit organization loses their nonprofit status because of mismanagement? How will that affect the relationship with the district? And will we allow them to continue raising money on our campuses and that sort of thing? Just to his point, I really think we need to bring a nonprofit expert in.
Actually, I have to that point. If we do choose to bring someone in for training, actually what I would suggest is that we train the site administration, only because there's so many booster clubs and they start at various times. I don't know that it's realistic to hit everybody.
And the
but
athletic
if our staff
directors
on campus is trained, and every year there's a checklist, who's our booster handbook, you know, something.
Right, and I think
that party started.
I think that goes to Dr. Meyer's earlier point about, you know, if the sponsor, which I'm not comfortable with that word, I think there has to be a better word than sponsor. But if the person who's the sponsor or liaison isn't there for long term, at least if our administrators and our athletic directors all have to go through this training, just like concussion training,
Right, that's exactly
at least
the
they
point.
should be there longer.
And they can be carrying the torch, hopefully.
Right.
You know, constantly. I think they probably call it a sponsor because you have to have a teacher sponsor a club, right? Is that what you pick?
Yes, and it's actually
Okay.
language that we use with our hiring and with our teachers. It's in our TEA, everything. It's
Well, maybe somewhere in the description of what a sponsor is, it says that it's an employee.
Yeah.
And
We'll-
that they
we'll-
have
we'll
to, I
clear
mean,
up
I don't think it's in there.
the definition.
And that they have
Okay.
to follow all of, whether they're a contract employee or on a stipend, that they have to follow all the rules of the board. I think that part might be on there. The other thing, the sample bylaws are great, but bylaws are adopted and formed by each nonprofit individually, and so it's nice to give them some guidance, especially if it does coexist with what our regulations are going to be and what our guidelines are. But we really have no enforcement mechanism as far as their bylaws.
Madam President, you're absolutely correct. And having sat on nonprofits before and been on the board, it's familiar territory. I think tapping into ASU is a great idea. They have asked for a clearinghouse and expertise and training and support, so I think it's right in line again with the feedback that we're getting, but certainly I think we'll figure out a way to include that, not only where it's appropriate in the manual, but our support and our training when we start to implement. So thank you for those suggestions.
As some master's student over at the ASU Center for Public Policy would love to get.
Oh, this would be a great doctoral dissertation
yes,
for somebody.
Yes, it would. Yes, if anybody's listening.
Can I make a quick, to that point with the bylaws? I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. With all those kind of little things in the document, and the bylaws is a good example, honestly, I don't think we need to go there. I personally think this document is more about this is what is acceptable and not acceptable from you know, helping them with bylaws and all that. Yes, let them do that. The more we dip our toe in, I think the more we're responsible and vulnerable. I wouldn't even go there with anything like that.
So the question, because part of that is they asked us to do this. The people in the committee asked us to give a sample.
Well, I mean, maybe the guy from the nonprofit can direct them. Honestly, I mean,
yeah, this would be like
the sample bylaws and things like that. Usually, like if a new PTO is forming, you call a neighboring school. You know, people have been doing bylaws since the beginning of time. I mean, I don't know that we need to go that far with all of this. I think we're just setting out guidelines. The more we get into bylaws and whatever little specifics, I feel like we're kind of infringing then on, they are a separate entity from us. So,
however, to that point, I think if their bylaws don't coincide with our regulations, that's where we need to step in.
well, but I understand what you're saying, but honestly, what could they possibly say in their bylaws? That they have to set fire to the field every week? I mean, you know, what could possibly be in the bylaws that wouldn't coincide?
One thing they could possibly say is that meetings do not have to be public.
Well, but with a 5013C, you have to have certain documentation. So I don't know that they would be able to do that.
You could just say it was all, you could have executive session minutes. That's your documentation.
Well, does it matter to us what they do with their boosters then?
I
Why we need training.
I personally
no,
don't
I think they need training. I just don't think we should get into a lot of little ticky detail with them.
Well,
yeah, I think if I could clarify, the sample that we put in there was just that, it's a sample.
Right.
We're not an enforcement mechanism. When they asked us, can you give us some samples out there, they were really asking for help. And the other thing that we were planning on sharing with them is, wherever appropriate, to create on the webpage a clearinghouse for booster support information and documents. So certainly, if it doesn't go in the manual, we don't have to put it there. The dilemma is we're trying to, I think, kind of meet two different requests and needs. They're asking for guidance and support, and I totally understand the caution. So we'll figure out what the right way
Well, and I think
to go
that
is.
the ASU, that's a brilliant suggestion
and
to solve a lot
AIA
of this.
too. AIA should be able to get some, because really this is, the bylaws are legal advice, and that's where I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think the ASU, though, is brilliant. Just to get someone in here, let's talk about nonprofits, all of that. I think that's wonderful.
And I'm sure AIA could, maybe they would be comfortable doing that.
Well, they can point us to someone and suggest ASU.
Well, and if I could, one of the last things, just to make sure that we bring to your attention, is we put in a recommendation for the booster clubs to annually create a checklist of all the important operating information that they have, which includes the officers, addresses, 501c3 status, copy of the budget if available, contact people. Are you planning on doing any fundraisers? If so, here are the district guidelines around how you're going to do a fundraiser, if they're on campus, et cetera. So again, we've really tried to provide a lot more of the checklist as opposed to us telling them how to operate. That information, more than anything else, is probably the single greatest step that we can make to make sure that we minimize the problems and the risk I can tell you personally, I have no interest in trying to be a policeman for whether or not they're following their bylaws, but I cannot tell you how much it's been eye-opening when they've told us what they want. And I think that's the difference. We made some assumptions, but we asked them, said, what do you guys need? And they gave us a list of about 6 pages worth of stuff.
Mr. Brown.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Okay.
this all started with
I'm
the
not-
to that point about 20 minutes
Well, yeah.
ago. So
Dr.
Denny
Meyer,
can go and I'll
you can
come
wait
back.
a minute.
So just back to the question on, yep, we're given the boosters guidelines. Are we going to do a similar thing for the coaches? The coaches or sponsors, because it's not just coaches, because the same thing happens in band, the same, where we're going to look at, guidelines for interaction of our employees with the booster club, educate them on gifting and that gifts need to come through the district, educate them on how they shouldn't be there for votes or to influence the booster club in any way or perceived to be influencing the booster club, how they'll spend their time with the members of whatever community they're representing, and so that there's no perceived, because this leads to, we get emails and calls almost daily about when a sponsor has been seen with I don't know, students at events where other students weren't invited, and how they use their position appropriately when with the district, because I think there's confusion about how our facilities are used by some of these people when the season ends, and when, and this goes on all of our campuses where keys are going all over the place, people are using fields and performing spaces when they shouldn't be there for personal gain. So all those things, and there needs to be, there are employees that are doing this, so, and we need to be clear that that's illegal. It's illegal. It's in state statute. So I think we have to address both sides of this equation, because with our sponsors not knowing the rules of engagement, I think that leads to the boosters also, and it creates this whole situation of perceived in some cases and real in others inequities among who gets to participate in certain activities at our schools.
We agree, Dr. Meyer, and in fact, that's part of what the plan is in terms of implementation and a focus, quite frankly, on ethics. At the end of the day, this is a conversation on staff ethics on that end, and that has relation to multiple policies, so we agree.
Well, and I think it's even bigger than, it's about ethics, but it's also about what the mission of the district is as it relates to our extracurricular activities. And, and we're going to have some of that discussion about grades, but, our goal is to have as many kids as possible participate in all of our extracurriculars, because we know it keeps kids in school, and we know that it improves all kinds of skills. And kids, these are kids, and they should all have an equal opportunity to participate in all of these things. So, can I keep going? I know we have this for an hour.
I'm just looking around the room trying to figure out, I know there's people that have been here long enough. There used to be a booster handbook and a sponsor handbook and trip handbook. Are we referring back to any of that? Because they used to be passed out to, to each group. Yeah, they were,
yeah, Madam President, yes, you are correct.
Okay.
Many of those have been converted to electronic documents. For example, we have a field trip document, tax credit documents, etc. In terms of booster for this particular purpose, this will be a new document because it's going to take bits and pieces from different places that are consistent that show up in the booster arena. But what we'll try and make sure is wherever the information is not included in the document, that there is some sort of reference point to that. But you are correct. We've had iterations of this in the past in some form or another. Some of it currently exists in the athletic handbook, and some of it exists in our facilities usage information. But this item of the comprehensive from A to Z, the things that we see consistently with boosters, that hasn't existed. So
Okay.
that part's new.
I remember, you know, on trips that certain people could handle money, certain people couldn't. You know, the boosters aren't supposed to, you know, collect any of the fees and keep those records. It's all should be done by employees. One of the things that's on here that I'm having a little bit of trouble with is number 7 on page 8. The Booster Club cannot require members or students to fundraise or raise a certain amount. For example, a student's ability to attend a trip cannot be based on raising a certain amount of money. And it goes on, but, you know, I think about trips that we've had before where everyone had to work a certain number of hours at a car wash and everybody had to contribute, and then there were some that just didn't, and they didn't do anything. They didn't, you know, and that caused problems between the students too, as well as the parents. That's why I'm wondering about, and I know trip is separate from the Booster Club, but I don't think we can tell them what their dues are or their fundraising and that sort of thing, as long as it's legal.
If I could, Madam President, this currently is a place where we continually have significant problems. This shows up essentially as a pay-to-play activity. You have to pay for this activity, it costs this much money. You have to pay for this activity, it costs this much money. And the problem that we run into is almost always this is that fuzzy area where it may be out of season. It may be a situation where the coach is still working with kids out of season. It may be a quote-unquote voluntary activity. But if you don't participate and you don't get involved, then it gets to, I think, what Dr. Myers talked about in the perception of favoritism and pay to play. So, I mean, maybe there's a way to improve that language, but that particular piece right now shows up, unfortunately, way too much. And when we have to go and look at and try and figure out what's going on here, whether or not it's a violation of policy, whether or not our employees have done something wrong, the fact that we don't really have any clear guidelines is exactly what leads to a significant number of these complaints.
Okay, so if we separate the students' ability to fundraise for something that they're doing on their own, and that should be something that the employee is tracking and not the Booster Club anyway.
Madam President, you are correct.
Okay, I think that could be clearer
Okay.
in this. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kirby.
Just to that point, I get everything you just said about the risks that come and why this language is in here. But the flip side of that is there are sometimes trips, let's continue to use trips as the example, that may cost $2,000 to attend a trip. And the Booster Club puts on various activities throughout the year that students can work to help support. So it's the student working as opposed to a parent working. And based upon hours worked, can receive money to their account to help them pay for that trip. And that student, if they were not afforded that opportunity, their family may not have enough money to send them on the trip. So that's just the other side of that coin. That you probably can figure out the language to allow for some to allow for what's right and disallow what's not.
And thank you, I appreciate that, Mrs. Kirby. The direct challenge with that is the student who would like to attend to do the fundraising but can't because he has a job, because he's supporting the family. So what we end up doing is we give opportunity to student A, but we inadvertently deny it to student B. And I totally understand where you are, so I think we can massage that language and come up with something that meets both interests there.
Wait, I have a question though with that. And I understand both sides of the coin, but the reality is they can't deny a trip to a student because the student can't pay for it, and who's paying for the trip then?
If I could, Ms. Peterson, these would be school-sponsored trips that would be part of the activity. Now, when you have, for example, tax credit, that becomes a whole different ballgame. But where this most likely would happen is if you have like an in-town part of your participation, maybe going to a festival or something like that that has an entrance fee that's not built in the budget, but it's not a tax credit that I'm going to be doing something associated with. So we have some of these activities that are kind of in between activities.
Okay, so let's say the Desert Mountain Band, they
Mhm.
went to London a year ago
Mhm.
for New Year's Day. All those kids worked literally for a year, fundraising, doing a million different activities, because it was an expensive trip for every one of those parents. You're telling me if a child didn't do any fundraising, didn't do anything, just paying for that trip? That's not a school-sponsored trip.
No, Mrs. Peterson, no. What I'm saying is if you required the trip, so if I sat there and said, you have to go on this trip, it's a condition of your participation and condition of your grade, totally changes the equation.
Okay, then I'm sorry, I did not read that in this paragraph at all.
Yeah,
I
so we
was-
can clarify that. It really talks about when you are mandated to participate versus voluntary in addition to that.
Okay. I think that does need clarification
Okay.
then, right.
Play devil's advocate, what if all your drummers didn't go on the trip?
What, right, right.
Could the rest of the group still be successful on the trip?
Well, I will tell you when the boosters really come in handy is if there really is a student who cannot go on a trip, they have stepped up and offered scholarships, and the kids can apply and that sort of thing. So there are things that the whole group can fundraise to help students who are worthy. And I really don't see that as going to the kids who just don't want to work.
Right, I wouldn't either. I guess I was just, right, when you brought it up, it seemed questionable, why are we okay.
Mr. Brown, did you want to finally talk?
To all those points. Let's see, where was I? I lost my mind. Oh, you know the trick on the fundraising and having kids participate? It's not where there's trips involved, it's where there's non-designated monies being taken in. We're going to, okay guys, today we're all going to go out there and you're going to sell 8 tickets and here you go. So son comes home, oh boy, write that check for 8 tickets. But you know, not everybody can do that. So we all walk back in, our son's a hero, he's got his 8 tickets, and they turn around and go, Fred, you didn't sell 8 tickets. You go out right now and go back out while everybody else is lounging, having pizza and a Coke. You go work some neighborhood and sell those 8 tickets, and don't come back till you do. That's what we've heard about, and that's what I think we need to really, really avoid.
Mr. Brown, that is correct. And as an example, when I get the knock on the door from the football player who has to raise a certain amount of money so he can participate in that activity, I think that's where we got to figure out what's the delicate balance where we honor the ability for the activity to do something above and beyond, but we don't inadvertently put kids in a pickle and put parents in a pickle. So we can massage this language, and I think we can improve it.
You know, and as long as I got my microphone on, going back to a bunch of stuff Eric was talking about, I think what the concern is just basically check and balance. So my hope would be that the sponsor has gone through extensive training and understands that regardless of the time of day or where you are bound by your employment contract and all the rules that go with that.
That's correct.
So boosters, you've got contracts, 501(c)(3)s, you've got all these binding things and rules. Sponsors, you are bound by your employment contract and everything that goes with it from SUSD, and understands there's ramifications if you cross lines.
We agree.
Well, and also, anything that a student's involved in directly is considered a joint venture. If the students are contributing some and the boosters are contributing some, then it's considered a joint venture. And I think there was another whole book on joint ventures. So that covers all
I
that.
included all the joint venture material in here.
I
We
did
had
see
that.
s- I
Yeah,
did
so
see
we've got
some of
that,
those
and then
things.
all the forms, et cetera.
Dr. Meyer.
Thank you. So Back to well, we can go with the joint venture thing. So I'm just trying to envision how that would work with, and I'll just use basketball example. Kids do a free throw shootout, $1 or not $1, penny per basket, let's say. Then the booster club has to give them the students a percentage of those dollars. Is that correct? Under the way this is written? I mean, I think that's the law. But.
Yeah, what we're recommending, I mean, absolutely, yeah. If the students do that, then the booster would be required to provide a certain percentage to the school district because the kids are involved. But what that language is really about is instead of it me being dedicated to Joe, who raises $5,000 and is able to say, my trip to the basketball tournament in California is paid for, and then his brother John only raises $200. Well, John, sorry, you can't go. It's really to try and start getting at when that creates an equity issue between our kids.
So, okay, so I agree with that because everybody who participates they shouldn't be penalized if they don't have the right grandparents to go ask or whatever. But this idea, because that's PTOs do that in general, but I don't know that any booster clubs, when they use students because the students are involved in all kinds of activities, because that group, when the PTO does it, you give it to the student government.
Correct.
When with a team or the band, there isn't a student organization to give those dollars to, or there is?
Yes.
Well, so like who on the football team do you give the money to?
Well, you create an account for your football program.
Okay. So then
we'd like that. That's really what our preference
and then the
would
kids
be.
decide
Absolutely.
how they would elect some leadership somehow.
Well, if you create a student activities fund, obviously you go through the requirements of student activities. We would much prefer in this process, and this is the guidance we're going to give boosters, is donate the money to the district through the gift process. Donate it to accounts, or if it's going to be fundraising for student activities, then put it in the student activities accounts. We have guidelines and policies and procedures on how to take care of those appropriations 100% by the book, by the law, transparent. It's when these independent purchases and the independent activities happen, and then we find out after the fact, and we get the phone calls and the parental complaints, and then we try and chase down, well, what happened? That's when it's pretty messy.
Well, I guess one can. I mean, we have to make this streamlined because to some degree because we don't. I mean, I'm already feeling like I never want to be involved with the booster club. So how do you? I mean, with all these things, I do want to be involved with the booster club. I'm just kidding.
If you want us to address these issues.
Oh no, I do. But we also need to, there needs to be. We've got this detailed here. But I'm sure we could get, I doubt we can get a one-page form, but a two-page form with the information that's provided so that a booster club at the beginning of whatever their season, or if it's the marching band, whatever their season is, or so that at the beginning they can give the bylaws, give a calendar, give the dates of their fundraiser. It would be great if the kids could decide if they want to sign a waiver to let the money just stay with the booster club. I don't know if that's legal or not. So that we wouldn't have to create accounts, so that if they want to participate in selling a coupon book like Denny described, for every one they sell, the kids can say, well, we want that just to stay with the boosters to pay for our trip to London. So, a way to have a calendar. They can post when their meetings are going to be, so that that the district will know, that the athletic directors will know, and that the parents that are participating will know, and all that stuff can be addressed. All the things we're asking them for can be addressed at the beginning. I don't know if that's possible, but it would streamline it. It would be online. It could be done easily by the booster clubs. I remember this. We had a similar discussion to this when we were doing our field trips, and we were having field trip problems with the parent volunteers not upholding their responsibilities as chaperones on the trips.
I think we fixed that one.
And the way we fixed it is we had our legal counsel do a video that you had to watch, and Michelle's like, yes, a video. He'll be great on this video. And I remember when I went on a trip, I had to watch the video, I had to sign off on it, and then I knew the rules. Like you know, and I think that would be great on both sides of the equations but in particular for our employees to watch, because some of our sponsors are not our full-time district employees that we have that are in the district. And then I did have questions about some details in the document. So when it comes to meals, for instance, during the season, because a lot of the teams have meals on away game days. Does this still allow that? And is the way this written that any kid at the school can also come to that meal?
No. If I could, Dr. Meyer, those are the current guidelines. Those aren't new. This is what currently is in place, and it's in place in the athletic handbook.
So, okay. So does that mean, it says that athletes and athletic teams may be invited to attend functions where free admission is offered and meals and refreshments are being served, provided all students from that high school are invited to attend on the same basis as the athletic team and get the same free admission.
That's, if I could, that's if you were doing some sort of special event like that.
Okay. Because they're talking about preseason and postseason meal.
Right. That's before the season starts and after. While you're in season, you get the chance to, it basically.
But that's not delineated in here.
So we can clarify the in season.
Because it just says other, and I just assumed that was in season.
Okay.
Mrs. Kirby?
Okay, thank you. Let's have a process question.
Okay.
Take me through what your timeline is for having the review committee more detailed look at this document, the training, rolling it out, etc.
Great question, Mrs. Kirby. After tonight, we're going to be meeting with the subcommittee that's working on the language. We're going to meet with them a couple of times between now and then the next board meeting in June. Our hope is that we present a final document for you to be approved in the June meeting. We would like to do that because that gives us enough time for full implementation to start off brand new in August. We would start training in August with teams as is it appropriate before their season. Mr. McKenzie and I had talked about putting together like programs and teams for the training. For example, we would get all of the volleyball coaches together. We would get all of the fine arts people together. We'd get all the football coaches together. We think we have more likelihood of making connections and clarifying the rules when we have like people of the same or similar programs together as opposed to everybody who's in the fall. So if I'm the football coach and the football coaches from all the different schools, and we can consistently share with them the same message. What does this mean for your football booster program and the relationship with them? And we plan on repeating that at least 3 times during the year based upon our different audiences with our coaches. We already have standing training that we do with our coaches, but this would be a different, separate training specifically focused on the issue. And again, we would really talk about, from a foundational standpoint, ethics. And if you read policy GBA staff ethics, the opening paragraph really says it all in terms of what this means. And it does help our employees align with the mission, vision, and goals of the district. Because it really talks about you're here for the kids.
Probably said this, but are you training just the district employees, or are you also training the booster presidents and officers of the booster club?
Madam President, Ms. Kirby, we would try and train the booster people as well. They've asked for the training. So again, we're going to try and do what we can to make appropriate training. They've also asked for the opportunity to be support for one another. So we have some very experienced boosters who say, I'll help you. I'm willing to be a coach. I'm willing to be a volunteer. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've stayed out of trouble for 20 years, so I think I can be a good resource. So they want to help each other, too.
Mr. Brown, we have about 5 more minutes, max.
I just wanted to say thanks. Thanks for starting this initiative, get this rolling. I just really appreciate the guts it takes to broach these subjects. So thank you. And on a byline, I'd like to see this online as soon as possible, so that through the summer, as opposed to sending out copies or whatever, we can be directing folks, hey, check this out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We appreciate it. Yes, we agree. Once the board gives us approval of the document, that will be the first thing that we do, is we'll upload it on the website and then begin reference, because that will now guide us for the future.
Mrs. Peterson?
Thank you, Jeff, very much. I actually didn't have a question about this. I wanted to ask, because I know we've got still like 2 hours ahead of us. Can we take like a 5-minute break, perhaps?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you.
I wanted to thank you very much. A lot of thought has been put into this, and I know it's a sensitive subject, and people have been just, doing things for so long, and sometimes they don't even realize that what they're doing is inappropriate. And so, but the main thing is, we really want, we want good people to volunteer. We want good people to be there and help our kids. And when things go awry, then the good people leave. And I want to protect them just like I want to protect our good kids. So that was the main thing. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. The next information discussion item is consideration of modifications to eligibility requirements for extracurricular activities.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Peterson and Sandra, and those of you who are still standing out here in the audience. We put together some information for you that you received in your board packet, and this effort was coordinated by Mr. McKenzie, Dr. Forlis, and me. And it really kind of started out with the board having a question regarding raising the policy from no pass, no play to perhaps a different policy or changing eligibility requirements. So before we jumped in and came up with a solution, we had to make sure that we understood, first of all, was there a problem, and if so, what was the scope of the problem? Because I think sometimes we start thinking about solutions when we're not really sure what's behind that. So what we did is we came up with some guiding questions. Is the current policy effective? Well, we had to know what our current reality was, and based upon that, what recommendations could we be making to the governing board regarding no pass, no play for students that are participating in extracurricular activities? So, you'll know me, I'm a person who likes to play in data, and absent of anything specific and knowing that we literally have thousands of students that participate in extracurricular activities, we would not be able to take the time and put the entire set of resources required to study every single student and every single activity, but we did what was called a purposeful sample. So we took programs at all 5 high schools, and you see the different programs that we sampled. We included athletic programs. We took a marching band program, soccer, swim dive girls, etc. That sample included 407 students, so it was a nice sample. And in addition, we did 5 focus groups at each of the high school, and anywhere between 6 and 12 students from each group were part of the focus group. So we figured between those 2 pieces, we'd at least get some pretty good foundational data around what was happening and also how our students felt. We did a follow-up meeting with several individuals, including Dr. Peterson, Mr. McKenzie, Dr. Sitton from Human Resources, and we included all of the athletic directors, and I believe all the athletic directors, 3 of the athletic directors are in the audience tonight, Mr. Kevin Movie, Dr. Logan Fox, and Mr. Sam Messina. So we're going to ask them to give a little bit of information in a minute, but they were part of the process to review the data, but then also help with the focus groups with the students. So here's what we found. When we did the range of grade point average from the sample population, we had a range from 1.0 to a 4.77, with a 2.0 being a C average. And the question, one of the questions from the board was that a cumulative grade point average? Yes. That's the grade point average of the entire time the student has been a high school student in Scottsdale, and that includes all content areas, all courses. We had in that data set 5 students that fell below a 1.5 GPA, and then we had 23 students that fell below a 2.0 GPA. So part of our initial interpretation was, because of the relatively minimal number of students, we looked at this and we didn't identify a systemic problem. And by that I mean we didn't have panic and, oh my gosh, you know, the sky is falling, we have this real hole in data. We found students, but we didn't sit there and say, okay, something is really crazy out here. But then we did the follow-up meeting with the athletic directors and the other administrators, and we said, okay, well, let's find out more about our students. So we did an intervention table to look at what was happening with our students and what interventions did we have or other actions. So you see this table here, and you see, per the Code of Conduct and the Athletic Handbook, all the schools are providing eligibility checks. Some of the programs and some of the coaches do additional grade checks, but it's not consistent across the board. Only one program had a required study hall, and all the schools had some sort of support mechanism and tutoring available for students. And what we talked about was the overall set of interventions from students, not necessarily just extracurricular related interventions. So we went to the next step. We did the focus groups. Here are the 5 questions that we asked. I'm not going to read you the questions other than question number 4 asked for the students to react on eligibility and what would their reaction be if we required students to maintain a C average. And then question 5 asked how they felt if we were to require students to be eligible to be passing classes all year long, not just during the academic, or I'm sorry, during the extracurricular activity or season. So what I'd like to do at this point is to bring a couple of our athletic directors up and share some of the reactions from the students in terms of the focus group and how they reacted, and then we'll go into what we certainly would like the board to consider for recommendations. Start with Dr. Fox.
Good evening, Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Peterson and Sandra. I'm Dr. Logan Fox, Assistant Principal and Athletic Director at Coronado, and with my focus group, the students basically shared that there would be a decrease in student participation if, in fact, the mandatory grade point average was raised to a 2.0. That would also severely impact marching band students, cheer, and other extracurriculars. And so what they are recommending is that we do actually implement more grade checks even throughout the school year so that we have that expectation, so that it's not just when students are in season, it's when they're out of season as well, because sometimes we see a decline in their grade point average during that time. So increase in grade checks, and then also mandatory study hall during season of sport.
Okay, good evening, Governing Board. My name is Kevin Mooney, and I'm the Assistant Principal and AD at Arcadia High School. And I found a lot of the same things that Dr. Fox found. As the numbers show, the vast majority of students are not affected by no pass, no play. The vast majority aren't. They are self-motivated students, are intrinsically motivated. They have good parents, good homes and whatnot, and they are not affected, and they would not be affected if there were a change. But there are some students who would be. And a lot of those students who would be are ones that I really find are the ones that most benefit from athletic participation, and maybe ones who don't have the homes where they have the good role models and whatnot, and that really are shaped perhaps even more by their coaches than by their teachers. I know for a fact that there's a handful of students at Arcadia that are graduating in 2 weeks that if it had not been for athletic participation would not have stayed in school. And I really am not sure quite what the benefit is, because I don't know how much grades would be improved, because again, most students are not affected by this, but I just really see that it could have a negative effect on some of the students that are student athletes at Arcadia High School. Just what I found. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sam Messina, Athletic Director at Chaparral High School. We're very fortunate at Chaparral that we have very high academic standards throughout our student body. Our athletes in particular, and research does support that athletes in particular when in season do maintain better grades. We were kind of at a mix as far as maintaining a C average as far as the students that I had an opportunity to speak with. We took students that had anywhere from a 1.5 GPA to a 2.5 GPA. And they were kind of, it was from core classes that say, you know what about just core classes? Are we also including electives? Some thought that it may put a little more pressure on them, but we were kind of mixed as far as the maintaining a C average. I will say this: I've had an opportunity to teach in a not so affluent school in the past, and coaching, especially at the lower levels in that. Sometimes this is the only thing these kids have. And I understand that kids will reach a certain bar that you may set for them. I understand that. But I also understand the situations where the jobs where some of these kids have to work, some of the just the home experiences that they may particularly go through. And we do have some of those students at Chaparral as well. But you know, overall, we're going to support what you do ask. But you know, raising these standards, this is something at this point I think we're pretty comfortable with at Chaparral and as athletic directors.
Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Peterson and Sonda, first of all, I'm not an athletic director. As a former principal at Arcadia High School, and also for 10 years, and an assistant principal at Desert Mountain, and just an educator for the last 20 years. I've got to speak up and represent all students, and like Mr. Mooney had alluded to, this may not affect a lot of students, but I have to talk of the ones that will. And some of our students are dealt with different cards, and I can tell you countless stories of students that are just surviving every day, whether they're homeless or they don't have food in their stomachs, or they have no family. I can go on and on about stories of and they're not stories, they're realities of our kids, and they struggle in school. They struggle. They don't have the support at home, and they don't. They come to us, and sometimes their athletic Titan family is the only thing that they have, and they get by barely. They work. There's so many supports in place, but sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes they do just get that D, and athletics, I've seen them turn themselves around. They come to us. They're failing. They're in gangs. They're just spinning out of control. But then they latch onto that athletics, that coach, that family, and it makes all the difference in the world in their lives. And I see them graduate. I see them join the military. I see them go to community colleges after that. So I guess I have to speak up for them, the ones that really try hard. And I just hate to set that. I know we want to set the bar high, and I get that. I do. I love setting bars high, but sometimes we have to also know those underdogs need us. They need that athletic family. So thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And we put in some of the responses there. We're not going to read those, but they're for your review from the different schools on each of the focus group questions. So after we digested all the information, we looked at the feedback from the students, we looked at the impact. We do have some recommendations that we would like the board to consider. The first one is not changing the current no pass, no play standard in and of itself. Keep it as it is, but add the following 4 bullets. The first one is we believe requiring students to be passing during season and during the off season will make a significant difference. We know, and you're going to get lots of data from our schools, that we know many of our kids, once the season is gone, their grades will slide because there's not that immediate accountability regarding maintaining a passing grade. We also would recommend that we look at a more frequent grade point check. Right now, governing board policy has us at 9 weeks as a minimum. We would recommend considering going to 4 weeks. That cuts it in half, and we're able to maintain a much greater level of vigilance on how our kids are doing. And many of the programs are already doing that more frequently anyway, but it's not necessarily a standard across the district. That we would like to require that all students that do have below a 2.0 must be in some sort of academic intervention or support system or program. Right now, there is no requirement. Some coaches may independently, or some sponsors or directors may on their own, but we believe this is a critical piece, that if you're not at a 2.0, let us help you, but let us not take away the participation in the extracurricular activity, because that very well may be the only carrot that's keeping you, and we want to support. And then finally, coaches, sponsors, and program directors would be responsible for the grade checks. They already are responsible to a certain degree, but this really gets at closing the gap between when we have people who are not on campus on a daily basis working with our kids and being able to make sure that they do that. At this point, do you have any questions?
Mr. Brown.
Just at a glance here, interventions for students. You know, I'm with you. I think those interventions need to be, there needs to be a continuity there throughout the district, and maybe the byproduct, and when I say interventions, by the way, I'm not just talking about studying and learning. You know, I know there's an issue out there kids showing up and they haven't had breakfast. Well, you know what? If you're going to practice, let's make sure you've eaten. You know, I mean, it sounds dumb, but we're just hurting, and you don't learn as well when you're hungry. So, I mean, that intervention, I think, needs to be a broad intervention and take in a lot of aspects of our learning. You know. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Meyer.
Thank you. So, and Cliff was telling me a little bit of this during the break. So what do colleges require for kids to be accepted at either the D1 level or?
Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Peterson, there will be a new sliding scale rule that will start at the colleges, but there is a sliding scale, particularly now, that entering there have to be at a 2.5 at some of your Division I schools.
So that would be your high school GPA upon graduation has to be a 2.5?
Well, but not at, let me back up, I apologize. At some of your colleges. I was speaking last night with the head women's and men's track coach at the University of Arizona. University of Arizona, when they enter, they're looking at kids be at a 2.5 grade point average. Now, that means that their ACT and SAT scores would have to, if they were lower than 2.5, would have to be higher. And that way they get them
Weight their
they
grade
weigh their grade.
with better ACT scores.
Correct. Saying that the athletes, though, as we spoke during the break, if they were failing a class, they would still be eligible to play.
At the college level?
At the college level.
Because they, I mean, go ahead, sorry.
You were asking me.
Well, no, I mean, you know, I think our district does a pretty good job of grading our kids. I mean, we have a lot of room for improvement, but some districts may not. And so they get kids that, I mean, you just see at ASU, 33% of the kids that come in need remediation in math and maybe failing math right off the bat.
But also our colleges have the opportunity, as we do too, but they're financially, they can have advisors, they can have learning resource people there at the beck and call for these athletes, and they all have, as I spoke with that coach last night, they have mandatory study halls that athletes must attend. All athletes at the University of Arizona must attend, and I believe they have the same at Arizona State as well.
So in here, when a student doesn't have a 2.0, it says must be an intervention or support system. So do we have a better definition of what that would be for our students, and would it include summer school, or how would that work? And is that year round? So if they are planning to play, you know, let's say they play a fall sport and they want to play next fall, how would that look?
Madam President, Dr. Meyer, we would like that as broad as possible a definition. There are lots of different interventions that may be appropriate for each student. It very well could be summer school. It very well could be after-school tutoring, or it could be intervention, additional time with the teacher. So we have lots of different approaches. It could be e-learning. The idea was, right now, we don't require them to do anything. They're quite frankly kind of hanging out there by themselves.
Right, and it's not just for our athletes or our people that participate in men. It should be all our kids should have these opportunities. But so who's going to determine what the quote-unquote intervention will be?
Well, I think that should be a combination of the coach, sponsor, administration, and the counselor. I mean, it should be part of, and potentially it could include special ed, it could include IEPs. I think it's going to be looking at each student individually and say, okay, you're not making, you're not at a 2.0. Let's figure out what we need to do to try and help and support you.
And that's just one of the things we should change, because it's not just coaches, because it's
Correct.
the band instructor,
It's
the
the
drama
band director,
teacher,
the sponsor.
whatever it is, because
Correct.
this applies to all extracurriculars.
Just add one thing, and I think it should be regardless of their ability. It doesn't matter if they sit on the bench or if they're the fourth chair in the band. This is all kids on
Correct.
that team in that program need the
And
same.
these coaches and sponsors know who are failing. They know those kids who are
Right.
are having a difficult time.
Again, it gets to perceptions. You know, it would be good, I think, if let's say the kid's not doing well in math. It would be great if their math teacher, who knows where the issue lies and the lack of understanding of the material that he or she is teaching, was the one that came up with the intervention. I mean, the coach sees that they're getting a D, but the coach isn't teaching them math. So I would argue that the coach should be involved and the coach should monitor, but the instructor of the course that they're not doing well in should be the one that says, you know, you're getting a D in math because you can't do X, Y, and Z, and I'd like you to, you know, take online, repeat the grade replacement over the summer or whatever, and they would work with the coach to come up with that solution. But I think the intervention needs to be appropriate to address the issue in the classroom.
We agree. Thank you, Dr. Meyer.
And then, so what you're telling me is that you're going to require all kids that participate in extracurriculars in our district to maintain a GPA of a 2.0, and if they're unable to do that, then they would get help from the district through interventions to improve their academic performance.
If I could, not quite, Dr. Meyer, no.
I knew you would disagree.
No, that was pretty good, though.
It's just I read it right off your sheet.
Yeah, it's not in that first bullet. We think once you put the standard out there, here's the data dilemma that we have, and it ends up being kids. If you put the requirement on the front end, what you have is you don't know who you're not helping. Students will self-select out of programs if they think that the bar is unreachable. And we may be back here a year or two saying, okay, now that we've done it and we've figured out and we've gone through, we aren't losing kids that way. But right now, from a professional standpoint as an educator, I would not feel comfortable with that, because then I'm not going to know who I'm going to lose, but I know I will lose kids. Now, if we get here and we do the data scan a year from now and we say, okay, here's where we started, and here's what we've seen in terms of the increase in GPAs and the increase in student achievement with these kids because of these interventions, then that gives us a different ballgame. But I think coming out straight out and saying all of a sudden we're going to go to a 2.0, that is my biggest worry, that we automatically by default will have kids who will say, you know what, I'm not even going to bother participating. And then there's no way that we know who those kids are. There's no way we can track how we can help and support them. And the reality is the greatest group that this is going to impact is freshmen. Freshmen have the greatest struggle academically, and all it takes is one tough semester, and it takes them a long time to get back to a 2.0 GPA.
Well, now, just for clarification, does this apply middle school or just high school?
Well, right now it would apply to high school. As a starting point would be our recommendation.
Well, why wouldn't it apply to middle school?
You would have even greater fall off in terms of participation with kids. You would lose, in my opinion, potentially hundreds of kids.
But
not of a C standard.
well, no, but I'm saying let's not talk about it. Let's say the standard stays the same.
Correct.
But you identify the kids and then start the interventions early. I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't start at middle school to say, look, you know, because what happens, just like you said, the kids get to high school and they haven't had any interventions in math, and then the next thing you know, they get their F, or they get, you know, so, I mean, just the sooner whatever standard we set, I think it should apply to middle school. want to participate. And the great thing about the middle school level is you've got all these kids participating because everybody gets to participate.
Yeah.
So
if I could, I think I understand, Dr. Meyer. I think what we were looking at in terms of the data scan, we really were focusing on the high schools because that's where the information came from the governing board. We absolutely can look at that with the middle schools. I believe when Dr. Sackos, she took off, when Dr. Sackos gave the presentation around the interventions that we need in terms of the middle school, that's directly connected to that. I think it's doable. We didn't put it in the presentation in terms of our focus tonight. We were really focusing on high school.
I have had discussion, and we just had discussion, Mr. Messina and I, on the very thing that you said. If we had to look at it, we would start at middle school because then we can see how that looks in the next 3 years, 3 or 4 years down the road.
So how will this be worded? Say, and I'd also like it to say, so this is going to go in our code of conduct, right? Or it's going to be, students are going to sign off on this, is that not correct?
Madam President, Dr. Meyer, if the board gives us direction to go there and we approve the changes in June, yes.
So it would be good for me to see what language is going to look like, because you're going to, I mean, the language is going to say you can maintain a D average and still play. But if you don't have a C average, you need interventions. And those interventions could include some kind of list, right? And then will it talk about the grade checks in the code of conduct? And then will it also include what it's required to get into college? Like if you think you're playing in college, you need better than the standard we're setting. You need a 2.5 GPA.
I could, yes, we can add that. I think unless we put what every single college has there in terms of their entry requirements, it's all over the map. For example,
So
if
the NCAA doesn't set the standard?
The NC2A, starting August the 1st, 2015, they will have that new sliding scale with the new minimum GPA at 2.3 in core courses.
Those are their academic courses in high school. You have to have a 2.3 GPA.
Correct.
Get rid of the electives now.
Correct.
After 2015.
Correct.
So this is similar to, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so what'll happen, because here's the other part of this. We have an awful lot of our kids who don't go Division I in athletics. In fact, the majority of them, if they actually do play after the high school level, they actually go to community college. And community college doesn't have that standard at all. So it's kind of a catch-22 unless we're putting out something particular to that. What would be helpful is if we do the change in the policy and we take a look this next year and say, what has the impact been around academic achievement and grade point average for the entirety of our student athletes? Then that'll give us a sense of, is this having an impact in that arena? And then we have data to say, okay, now what's the next step? Because then we very well could come back a year or two from now and say, yeah, it does make sense to go a 2.0. We just right now don't have any data that tells us what the impact is going to be on the kids.
How are you going to track that data? How will you know? Because we lose them anyways. Or maybe the kids always come and they just pick it up and everybody gets a C.
Yeah, we really could. I think what we've talked about in terms of tracking the data is to do a cumulative average comparison of the students before the policy, snapshot of time after the policy, and then do a comparison. What's changed in terms of the GPA, but also what are we doing in terms of notification? How many kids are we identifying for intervention and support that we didn't identify before?
Dr. Peterson, did you have something to add?
Yes, thank you. Again, we talk about the NC2A, but I think it's important to recognize that a lot of the students that we're talking about are not athletes. It's our marching band kids and some of those folks. So we need to make sure that we are looking at those standards, and I think what's important is we have to put the mechanisms in place, and then let's see what happens over the course of the year, and then come back to revisit it, because we want our kids to be successful. But we've got to start something as a jumping off point to make that happen, and really to get our kids, we've got to do it. And we also got to make sure we have the right supports at the school to do this, because it does us no good to say we're going to do it in the manual or a handbook, yet we really don't have the supports in place to make it happen for the kids. So we've got to make sure that we have the proper supports to make that happen, and I think that's going to take us, looking at that and trying to analyze it. But the majority of what we're looking at, our athletes overall are doing pretty good. It's some of our other extracurriculars that are issues too, that it was surprising to us when we pulled the data.
Comment, and everybody, I know everyone has their lights on, but that's what I was talking to Cliff about during the break. I was saying, well, maybe it's because we have the supports for our athletes, and some of those athletes do get the tutoring, that they can pull up their GPAs, and we don't do that for some of our other extracurriculars, and we should be doing it for all our students.
And then we have to be careful, because in some of our classes, performance is a requirement as part of their grade. So we're saying that some of these things are extracurricular, and yet we would penalize them because they couldn't participate in it, and yet they would impact their grade, whereas other ones who participated in it, it would be counted as an extra point to their grade. So it's a tough one to really make sure, depending on which area we have to look at.
And if I could, I pulled up the slide again to go over some of the interventions, and here's what we have. Although tutoring is available, it's not generally out there for all of our students in extracurricular activities to either voluntarily take advantage or be required to. So what we're talking about is taking advantage of what's already in place, but in a much more systemic way. Because right now we don't have consistent requirements that if you are below an academic standard and you are involved in extracurricular activities, that you do anything at all. So this would be a real leap for us in trying to figure out, can we start making that a mandatory provision if we think kids are at risk? And we think that's an appropriate step.
Mrs. Kirby?
I have a question for the athletic directors and Ms. Woolsey, if you can make your way up. While they're making their way up, I want to share a story. I talked to a lot of parents because I have weighed this decision heavily, and I've talked to quite a few parents in the past 4 weeks who have all expressed shock that our standard is a D. One of those individuals is a leader in our community who attended Saguaro High School in the late 60s, participated in sports. And what he said to me resonated like no other comment that the parents that before him I had spoken to did. And he said that because I remember when I was a kid, he says, I remember I needed the teachers on my side if I wanted to play sports. So I went to class, I did the extra credit, I kept my eyes open, I did my homework because I was always on the borderline and I needed that teacher in my corner to help push me over. And he said somewhere along the way in the past 40 years that pendulum has shifted. So that was powerful to me because I do believe our teachers need support as well. So my question for the folks that spoke earlier, while I also understand the need for the family and the community that the extracurriculars provides these kids that are borderline, what would be your reaction to a solution to maintain the current standard to participate, but to actually perform, to get out on that field and perform in the marching band, or to suit up and play in that basketball game, you have to have a C. You can be on the team and you can go to practice with a D, but to perform or to play in the game, you have to have a C. I'd like to get your reactions to that.
If I can just digress for 1 second and kind of, Dr. Meyer, what you were talking about earlier, about that connection with the teacher and the coaches. From my understanding and currently coaching myself, that interaction does go on a lot. I mean, if you ask me and you put my roster in front of me now, I would be able to tell you of which kids, are my solid students, which kids need a little extra help, which kids need a little push from behind. I should be able to tell you that as the head coach. And it shouldn't just be with my varsity. That should be throughout my entire program. Now, football is a large program. That would be a little more difficult track. I get that. But with most of our programs, your coaches should be able to do that. And I know that, and I've been fortunate to teach at 3 different high schools and in different districts, that does go on with teachers. They do communicate with that coach and say, hey, I understand that, you know, this particular student needs a little extra help. Let's work together, because that does help the teacher as well. And the one thing that, you know, we try to push on our kids is be the teacher's advocate in the classroom. I understand exactly what you're talking about, Ms. Kirby. I agree with you 100% that you do need that teacher on your side. I get that. But the one thing I continue to go back to is I know we're trying to raise these standards. I understand that. And again, we are blessed with great athletes within this district, not just at Chaparral, but throughout our other schools as well that go on. But this is their motivating factor for them continuing to come and continuing to work. And as I've always said, I've had parents in the past that have wanted to pull their kids off of my program and say, look, you know, he's not passing, I'm going to take them out of there. Well, what you're doing is you're removing me from that your son's life, that I don't have a chance to positively impact them as an educator, as a coach, to try to continue to help and nurture. I understand if we have kids that are failing, that's exactly what they do now. And there is some motivation for them to get back to that passing point. I do understand that. But, and you bring up a very good point on that. But the question is where are we going to draw that line? Is that line going to be drawn at a C, or is that line going to be drawn at a D? I do understand where you're coming from. But I think it's going to be a jump if we're going to make it now. I think if we're going to do it, it was mentioned earlier, we need to do it and start it with the freshman group. Dr. Meyer mentioned we probably need to start it in middle school. This needs a process so you do start educating as these kids go. You know, and I think it's just a matter of where you're going to draw that line and when you want to start.
So do you, I'm assuming,
if you're going
I'm
to go
reading
down
between the lines
I'm
of what you're
understanding
saying.
I'm understanding what you're saying, because we do have that in place. When a kid is not passing, they're still practicing with us, and the motivating factor is to get back out on the field. That is the motivating factor to play in those games. That's why the kids participate on the team.
Okay, so wait, now that's new information to me, because I thought to be on the team and practice you had to have a D, but that's not the case.
To play.
It's actual to go out in
Yeah.
the court, and you have to have a D.
Correct. You have to be passing when we have our grade checks. That's correct. You can't suit out and play.
But if I have all Fs, if I'm failing every single core class I have, and I am 6'8" and the star of the volleyball team,
okay,
I can still be on the team. I just can't play. Okay, thank you.
That would be correct.
Because what you're doing, say if we did take that kid out, then they're done. I don't see them trying to participate. Well, they're done already, but what this coach is going to do is try to put every measure in to save that kid. And that's what you coach for, to save kids. That's what we teach for, to save kids. And we will lose those kids who need that motivation from a person like him who coaches. These two don't coach, but this person coaches. And they're going to lose that motivation from that coach.
So as a follow-up question, did you, in your data gathering, Mr. Thomas, check out Paradise Valley, Cave Creek, surrounding neighboring school districts of what their standards are?
We did, and we have varying standards. I think the one that probably has the toughest standard is Peoria, because they do require a C grade point average. The majority of the surrounding districts are going to be very similar to ours, no pass, no play. And in fact, I think Dr. Meyer he and I had talked about Peoria's standard. And then the other districts, you have varying approaches. It's really very inconsistent in terms of what people do. The majority of them stick to a no pass, no play.
Madam President and Mrs. Kirby, I know you just learned that even a student is failing, they may practice, they may attend games, but they may not participate. But I still want to second what Dr. Woolsey shared, that we still have that at-risk group of athletes and students that participate in extracurriculars, that may be their one time that week that they are able to succeed and shine in their element, whereas in the classroom they struggle. But I agree that they do need to establish that relationship with their teachers. I know, we don't coach as athletic directors, but we do maintain relationships with our athletes and mentor them. And I definitely, even as an assistant principal, I encourage students who are not succeeding, go to your teacher, let them know, I want to pass your class, or I need to pass your class for X, Y, and Z, and let them know or ask them, what do I need to do to pass your class? So we definitely encourage those relationships, first and foremost.
Madam President, Mrs. Kirby, I think that in my mental model of what we do for kids in school right now, I think our teachers, our coaches, we do work as a team to support students. And thank you for sharing that story of your friend that went through school and was an athlete. I listen to stories from my husband that has been an athlete in the past, in years past, and comparing from where he came in school, where they just passed him to get on that field, to what we do today. Our teachers, in my point of view, really care, and they're not going to just give that grade. They're gonna provide the interventions to bring that student up. So when we look at a threshold or a cutoff point, is it a D, is it a C? To me, it's everybody working together to make sure that student does show academic success and all successes. So I, again, think that compared to years past, if I go on my husband's experiences, that we do care about that academic education. In years past, it may not have been the same with athletes, according to his experiences.
Mrs. Peterson?
Thank you all this has been a really robust discussion. Well, yeah, it is late, but I have to say, I do think the standards should be increased. However, David and I spoke about this at length. I don't want a child precluded. I know a lot of kids, that is the one thing. It's playing the trumpet, it's running down the football field, whatever. I don't want to lose those kids. I think really Mrs. Kirby really said it, and it's kind of what Mrs. Woolsey alluded to. The bigger worry, let's be honest, we're worried that the adults aren't responsible. We're worried that kids are being passed so they can play. And I know there are thousands of instances in our district where teachers and coaches and everybody's in synchronicity, and honestly, I think if we all look at our hearts, we know there's also instances where that's not happening. And that's what, I mean, I'm sure there is. We're all only human. We're a very big district. We need to make sure somewhere, and maybe the middle school is the ticket, maybe that's our compromise. Maybe we start at middle school. I thought there was a policy at middle school where they had to have a standard to play sports, no?
Well, they can't have an S. They have to be passing their class.
Okay.
Right.
What if something like that was the compromise, where we start ratcheting it up, like at the 7th grade level, and start building our kids into this? I don't mean over a 10-year period either. Right.
For next year, right?
Correct.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I just, and I don't know that kids.
Well, let's track it though too. Well, no, I agree with you. Let's track it. We don't want to lose kids. Let's get them the intervention. There's a middle ground here. There's a middle ground for a child that we're losing altogether. My God, let's not be ridiculous. Let's pull them back in. Let's do what we need to do. It's just, I don't know that we're doing them any favors by setting such a low standard. I mean, if they can't even go to an in-state college, that actually kind of worries me.
If I could, there's one thing that I think has been missing in the entire conversation, and that is there are some kids where they have to work really, really, really hard to get that D. And I go back to my days as a classroom teacher, and I realize I have not been in the classroom since 1996, so it's been a few years. But I recall oftentimes working with kids that where they were academically, where they were in terms of their cognitive abilities, not every one of our students is able to easily get a C. Some of them have to work incredibly hard just to get a passing grade on that. And what we haven't looked at is there are a lot of our students that are special education students that are involved in extracurricular activities that may have other issues going there that this could potentially impact them too. So I want us to make sure that we're as broadly aware as possible in terms of what that impact could be.
And let me be, I think maybe the one little disconnect, I read loud and clear from back here and out there, we're all on the same page. We all want to do the best thing for kids here. No, of course, if a child is struggling, no, nobody wants to punish them. What I hear and what I agree with is where we can raise the standard, let's raise the standard. Let's stretch them where we can stretch them. Again, we're not doing anybody any favors setting the lowest possible standard that everybody can meet. Let's see where we can grow. Let's see where we can stretch. Yes? Do you all agree?
Mr. Brown?
Yes, I agree. You know, I think the trick for me is it's not no pass, no plays. When does the intervention kick in?
We agree.
So, I mean, if you got somebody wavering at a C who's going to flip to a D, well, where's the trigger, you know, and when does that kick in? So for me, that's the deal. The other thing on the middle schools, I would rather have the same program for middle school intervention kick in so they know what we're expecting when they get to high school. So when that kid's got a D or he's wavering from a C, interventions kick in. I mean, we're just going to identify the child or the young person and get them early. Let them know what's going on. The other thing, too, is to avoid the, we'll just get them slipped in here. The minute that trigger kicks in, a broad range awareness through all their classes and through counselors, whatever the case is, so somebody's not just slipping somebody in. To avoid that, well, he just got a C just so he can play. You know, we want awareness just to make sure everybody's on the same page. That's about it.
Mrs. Kirby?
Okay, it is not in human nature to want to fail. And kids in particular, if you raise the bar, they will figure out how to get over it. Now, having said that, let's talk about how we might move forward, because what I heard a second ago was very interesting to me. Accept the proposal that you've put forward for high school, raise the standard in middle school, and then start to roll those kids forward every year. So you, for example, you might start with 7th graders, raise the standard, and then next year your standard applies to 7th graders and 8th graders. And then the next year it's 7th, 8th, and 9th. Now my concern with that though is I've not heard yet whether or not we have intervention systems in place in the middle schools.
Madam President, Ms. Kirby, I agree. I think that needs to be really worked with in terms of middle schools, but there's a huge part of the population that we, if we're going to do that extension, need to get into the conversation, and that's our middle school principals and our middle school administrators. When we did this conversation, we strictly worked at the high school level, but as we've done all this work this year around preparing for middle school intervention, I want to make sure that we're aligned with what they're doing and we don't inadvertently throw them a structural curveball. So I think what we'd want to do is, as quickly as possible, bring them into the mix and say, okay, how does this fit for you in terms of the work that you've been doing with your restructuring and with your interventions, preparing for implementation of the house model. It makes a lot of logical sense. So from that end, I just have a little bit of caution right now in terms of implementation without bringing them in the conversation. And I think we would want to do that as quickly as possible. And I think we can do that, you know, before the next board meeting, you know, if we follow a recommendation. But that's a critical group we have to have in the mix if we're looking at this type of substantive change with our middle schools.
I'd like to
clarification to what Pam said. So I just want to be clear so that everybody's on the same page. So are you saying that at 6th grade we would then require a C average to pass? Is that what you're talking about, raising the standards? Or are you saying, I just want to be clear.
7th grade.
I'm not suggesting that, or 7th grade. Whatever grade, 7th grade. Or are you saying that these types of interventions that are recommended by the administration will also be rolled out at the middle school level with the blessings of the principals and athletic directors at the middle school.
What I said was, as a compromise to just raising the standard to a C in high school, we might consider accepting their recommendations for high school, and then with 7th grade, next year, raise the standard to a C. But you would have to have the intervention systems in place to go along with that. And then the following year, it would apply to 7th graders and 8th graders. And then you would just continue to roll forward. But that was offered up as a compromise. And so if the middle school leadership comes back to us and says, no, you can't do that, I think I'm back to just raising it to C.
One other thing that you might think about is that if we raise it to a C, and you talked about how no student wants to fail. On the other hand, I do know that a lot of times they'll take the path of least resistance. So I'm wondering if we raise it to a C, if we will have more students not choose to do honors and AP and IB, or to take, to try to take some high school classes in the middle school. I know a young lady that is very gifted, getting A's and B's. She got a D in AVID of all things, which is, supposed to be, there are ironies out there. I guess having been with some kids that, and I know you've all seen it as educators, if you've seen a couple of students that have been quote unquote saved and actually graduated just because they felt like they had a place. Maybe they graduate with a D, maybe they don't go to college, but they get that high school diploma. We are graded on our graduation rate. And when I look, I tried to find evidence. I'm trying to find evidence out there. I searched for a very long time. I found anecdotally that if you raise the bar, students will reach it. I've heard that a lot, and I've seen that happen too. That can happen just as well, but it's just as apt for it to go the other direction. And with the self-selection, we have put in so many intervention things. We're going to have additional counselors. We're going to be toughening our standards. Our Common Core standards are going up, which, when they're in 3rd grade and we know that they're going to be reading on grade level, that's fine. But we have a whole pipeline full of students that all of a sudden are going to be faced with standards that might be much higher than what Arizona asks for right now. We don't know. There's, I'm really concerned about graduation rates. That's what I'm concerned about, is that students will give up, that they'll drop out. And we haven't had our discussion yet on consistent grade policies. We know that there can be 2 teachers right next to each other teaching the same subject, and one is giving A's and the other one is giving C's for the same amount of work. There's just so many things that we are doing, and there's so many things that we're trying to put into place all at one time, that even if we collect data, no scientist is going to change 8 different variables and then decide what thing worked. And even though we want to step up and do the right thing for kids, this comes back to the same thing we talked about earlier with the booster clubs and the coaches and that sort of thing. It's an ethics issue. And all this other stuff has to be done just because of that one thing. And this is an academic achievement issue. And if we put in the interventions and we go to the Common Core and we have 3rd graders reading at 3rd grade level and 7th graders coming in at 7th grade level, they're going to succeed. And we're here to make them succeed. We're there to help them succeed. And if participation is one of those things that helps them succeed and helps them get their high school graduation, they may not go to college, but we know that by graduating from high school and having that diploma, they're going to be better off.
All due respect, it's excuses, excuses, excuses. And are we really helping kids succeed if we lower the bar so low to ensure they get over and graduate? I just don't think so. I don't think we're doing our kids a service, because they will not be ready for real life.
Well, when you say our kids, I think that's part of the problem. When you go into some of these schools, and I go to Supai every week, and I used to go to Yavapai every week, and you have students that can't even speak English when they come to 7th grade, and but they can draw, and they can do sports, and there's a lot of things that they can do, and it's soccer. I mean, that's huge. They literally live for that. And sometimes it's just a matter of maturing until they get to the point where they realize that the rest of it needs to all come together too. But they grow at different rates, and I don't know. I just am one of those people that if one kid falls through, most of them are going to do really well. Most of them are going to try to succeed. It's just we're talking about 20-some kids here. And yes, I do everything we can, but also do it for the kids who aren't participating in anything. I mean,
20 kids were on the 400 that you sample. So that's
okay.
That's a 7% of all. It's not just 20 kids.
Well, then I don't know why we don't have that data, but.
I mean, the point's well taken in the fact that we have kids that, what I used to say when I was a principal, that's carrying baggage. And we know that at one particular high school where the coaches have changed practice days for only 2 days out of the week because a number of kids have to go to work, or they have to go home and watch their brother or sister, or those students who are at other high schools who have to work and try to train as well. There will be some kids through the cracks that we will lose. But I do agree, and I think we are all on the same page. I know that we need to set some type of standard to help our kids grow academically, but we will lose a number of them, and I would have to agree with Madam President on that.
What I didn't finish with the research that I was doing, while I didn't find like hard data in the other direction, I did find hard data that said students that participate in extracurricular activities are more apt to have a higher GPA and are more apt to also graduate. And that's what we're here for, is to get those kids through school and graduate. And we hope that all the intervention things, we don't want anybody graduating with a D, whether they're involved in extracurricular activities or not. But if they want to be there, and if they're still benefiting from it, I just can't see denying that to them. They're still kids.
How do we get to the bottom line here? Oh, I'm sorry, were you talking? Go ahead, please talk.
I'm not talking, but I could.
No, let's get to the...
So just a couple logistical questions. So we have 400 kids that we know of and that we polled and found out, I guess, through coaches.
We pulled their cumulative GPA.
So you just pull them out of, okay. So, all right. So if we'll look at the middle schools and you'll come back with a proposal by the June board meeting of what that might look like. Right. So I just want to know what that would look like in the middle school. I would really like to see how you're going to word this, because word it like I worded it, which you didn't like. Word it how you want to word it, but somehow it's going to have to say somewhere that if you don't maintain a C average, that you will have to do interventions, and I would help you to get it. That's we want all our everyone in our district to do well, and athletes, band members. I would love to get that message out before the school year ends. Know that we are going to be having higher expectations next year, because this is higher expectations. I mean, check. interventions, I'd like to know then, if we go with this, if we take your recommendation, I want to know how we're going to collect that data and track these kids to see what. Because if it works for band members and athletes, we can use it for all those kids that aren't even in extracurriculars, and I think they should programs, because everyone's pointed out we want everybody to be successful and reduce dropout rates. On the school board, I plan to be on the planet a little longer, but you know, I can tell you that if I was still on the board, I want to see that data, and then based on that data, I don't know what I would recommend for a year from now. But if the district is successful at taking those 28 kids and getting half of them to pass with these interventions, I think that would be a success. So if we know who these kids are, we can find out right now, and our coaches probably know who they all are on our campuses now. You know, Sam's different. He's here year-round. He's on campus. Some of our coaches come and go, and I know we're working at changing that model in our district. But, you know, the coaches that we hire, or the band instructors that we hire, or the drama teachers that we hire, need to buy into this too if they aren't our regular, our on-campus employees, and they won't have those relationships with the teachers. You know, I don't know how we're going to do all that, but you know how I feel. I think we should set this high and we should make them do it, but I'm wrong sometimes. So I'm willing to wait, and I'm wrong a lot, actually. So,
Ask Sarah, right?
yeah, just ask Sarah. I mean, I know Pam will be here, and I know Denny will be here, and Bonnie will be here, and I'll come back as a guest speaker and give them public comment.
We're not,
I
I
remember.
don't know about Bonnie here.
I was going to say, Dr. Meyer, we can make sure we get you a summary report.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So you know, all of our goal is to make sure our kids do well, and I believe in setting standards high. I mean, I can tell you, if my kids had a 2.0, it'd be like, they know they won't be going to basketball practice or to the game or anything, and they know that. I think that there is value in that and setting the bar high, but I'm willing to take your advice until I'm off the board. And I just gone.
Look at middle school also. I mean, can we
Yes,
talk with the middle school principals?
Madam President, members of the board, the good news is we have a principals meeting this Thursday, 2 days from now. We will speak specifically, and we've heard you loud and clear, we will speak specifically with our middle schools, and on Friday, we will follow up with an initial memo based on our discussion on Thursday's middle school principals, so that, and I've been just conversing with Dr. Sakos on that, so we will make sure that we start that process for you to get their input and come back with some good plans and some good ideas.
And then the high school principals will be there too, right?
Yes.
So they can know we're moving forward with
Well,
this.
and they already do know, because based on these inputs and things, we've been talking with them. That was one of the reasons why they were at the study session earlier this evening, and all the high school principals were there, because they've been working through this.
And can we have some total data? I mean, I would have to imagine that we could pull up the middle school students who would be at risk and the high school students that would be at risk,
That
rather
would
than just a
be-
sampling.
That's a significant data pool, and it will take a lot of time to do it. Why we did the sample is, I mean, to be perfectly honest, we're looking at 2 to 3 weeks of intense data and manipulation to really hone this down, because what we know is we don't have clear rosters of which kids. So
Well, no, I'm not talking about students that are necessarily involved in extracurriculars, because clearly we want all of our students, whether they're involved or not, to raise it. So maybe just an idea of who would be, whether they're participating
So
or
you
not.
want how many
just
kids that are
The
below?
2.0.
Okay.
And at the grade level, and Ms. Forlis, Dr. Forlis.
We have been, since the beginning of this school year, our original August meeting, when we started talking about retention or K-8 policy and monitoring report card period, our principals, our middle school principals have been pulling DNF reports. So we have all of those for this year. We can take a look at how many kids have Ds and Fs by school, by subject area.
By middle school.
At middle school, not necessarily connected to athletics or
Right.
extracurriculars.
We don't need that.
I heard you ask, you just want a scan of how many kids are earning Ds and Fs in our high schools, absent of whether or not they're.
Well, basically, under a 2.0 and under a 1.0.
Yeah, not by subject area, just for middle schools, how many kids are 1.0 and less,
Right.
and how many kids are 2 to
Keep
1.
it simple.
We've already pulled the data that have how many kids have Ds and Fs, so.
We will get it for you. We'll run it based on grade point averages, and we'll get you straight grade point average counts.
Okay. I make a motion right now that we table.
This was
No,
an information.
well, before we get to the action items, can we table the action item 11B? The revision of governing board policies, can we table that?
Michelle's been waiting here all night.
I was going to text you, Michelle, and warn you, but would that be okay with the board?
Are we done with
another
this?
month?
Are we done with this discussion before we table?
We can go on for another hour. Go, please.
Well, we're like 15 minutes past the hour right now that was allotted.
That discussion, are we done?
Well, no, you
I
can
think we've
keep
asked them
talking
to
if you-
come back and turn your light off.
So if I could, let me summarize, Mrs. Sneed, so we know what our next steps are.
Yes.
We are going to provide a cumulative data around DNF reports for our middle school kids, or you want GPA?
No, GPA, not DNF.
Are we able to calculate GPA?
I don't know that we do GPA in middle school.
I don't know if we calculate that. We'll try it, but we'll be able to determine the report where the kids are in some form or another. So we'll do that. We'll also meet with high school and middle school principals, give them feedback from the governing board, what your thoughts and your direction are, and based upon that feedback and the feedback that you've given us, we'll look at making some modifications and clarification. And then if we feel that we're in a place, we'll bring that back to the board, and then we'll get your reaction and direction. Does that provide an appropriate summary?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. I just want to make sure I know what I'm doing once we're done with this.
It would be, I mean, it's helpful for us to know that if there aren't GPAs posted for middle schoolers, it would be kind of hard to track.
It's typically, we
Okay.
don't do middle school GPAs.
Okay.
We
Oh.
DNF reports. Yeah, we can poll kids that are failing in classes, but it doesn't translate to a GPA.
You could have an A and a D and it works out for, you know what I mean? I don't know.
No, you
It
create a
can.
query to do GPAs. based
And then
upon-
you just have to structure it differently. So then, if a kid wants to participate and they have a D in a class, then they would do an intervention.
Do an intervention.
You know, you try and help them out, because you don't want them to have a D, because when they
No, of
get
course
to,
not.
so.
Okay. We can put this to bed for tonight? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, the next item would be number 10, an action item, approval of closing Sierra Vista Academy.
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Thomas is going to be just asking for your approval based on our prior presentation from the last board meeting.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the governing board, Dr. Peterson and Sandra, this is a very straight item. We just would like you to approve the recommendation before the board. We don't have any additional information, but this is a technicality, so as we move forward and change our model for next year, it needs the board to take action. Are there any questions from the board?
I think there was a question as to where the students will physically be when they're not at Sierra Vista.
Madam President, members of the board, they will be at either their home school, or depending upon what the nature of study is from some of the students, they may be at home doing e-learning. And it will be individual education depending on a case-by-case basis. But the majority of them will be at their home school for part of the day.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any
I'll
other,
make-
any
yeah.
other discussion or questions?
I think this is very sad, I have to say. I know we're restructuring it, but I'm very sad about this. And I had agreed with the newspaper story that this, that
Mhm.
from about a month ago, that this really was kind of the lead story. It's a shame that finances have brought us to this. I know, I think it's sad.
Well, finances and No Child Left Behind.
Well,
because of the
absolutely, right,
AYP.
absolutely, and No Child Left Behind, yes. So, regardless, I move that the governing board approve the closing of Sierra Vista Academy effective as of 2012-2013 school year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that'll be 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, future action.
I have a future action request.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way with our board meetings, maybe not to have so much in one evening? Because these are all really
Well,
important things.
right.
But I feel more badly for the staff than
Well-
anybody. I mean, Sandra, how long have you been here today? Are you going on like hour 20 yet, or?
Well, it's a trade-off. I mean, it's staying late one night a month or working every single day of the month to provide you the information you need
I
for
guess
more
that's
than
true.
one board meeting.
Well, and what I also worry about is, do we give the time and attention to stuff towards
That's
the
what was-
end?
Well,
Do you know what I mean? That
right.
also makes me worry.
And maybe what we think about doing is, when we have, when it looks like it's gonna be packed, maybe we have 2 meetings that month.
Or maybe, yeah, even if the presentations could be, I mean, I thought all the presentations were great tonight. In general terms, maybe streamlined a little bit, assuming that we've all come prepared for the meeting.
Oh, I don't think the presentations took up our time.
I don't think the presentations took any time, so that's why I wanted to clarify that.
Well,
I just meant in the most broadest of terms going forward.
Well, but we had this discussion 3 or 4 years ago about presentation and length of presentation. I mean, we've read the presentations before we come. I think in general, our board is relatively well prepared. So if we can make them shorter, it does help. And yes, tonight we spoke a lot, but some nights we don't. So
important.
Because we had, before you, the 3 of you all came on the board, and I don't remember, but we limited our presentations to 10 or 15 minutes at the superintendent's discretion in order to cover the topic.
Board meetings to 3-hour cutoff, because we were going until.
Well, we were
Right.
going 8 hours. sometimes.
Well, and when I first started, we were coming twice a month. We had twice a month meetings in the beginning. So we voted to go to once a month, but now they're getting longer and longer. And maybe that's just by nature because it's
I
at
think it's
the end of the
year. There's a lot
So we're
going
trying
on, in
to
all fairness,
squeeze
yes.
everything in, and a lot of people are asking for discussions, so.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Dr. Peterson has communicated this, but I just would like to make it official by requesting as a future action, the board member, in the board meeting, is that on the June 5th, is that the date of the next board meeting, that we have the discussion around K-8 at Kiva.
Governing board reports? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, future action.
I was wondering if we could revisit, I'm not exactly sure of the phraseology or the words. Smart schools, is that when the person retires and we hire them back and stuff? What is that called? Smart schools? Could we revisit that just a bit in some kind of?
It's called, Smart Schools is one of the providers. There's several providers in the state. It's basically return to work or phased retirement.
Why don't you tell David, because I'm afraid we're going to get too far in this conversation.
No, let's move on.
Maybe tell David what it is you're looking for, and then,
Decide if we want to have a board discussion or whether we can get a board update by email.
Okay. Governing board reports, I will forego mine. Yes. Mr. Brown.
I just want to talk about the Magic Bus, the e-coach thing. It was a great day, huge turnout. Of course, we all gave kudos to the technology group and everything. But, you know, I dropped off my kids at 7:30 in the morning, at Mojave. And standing outside was Carla's crew, Becky and Ken. And I think we just need to throw some kudos their way that they brought all that press to that event.
Cool.
And we really appreciate your efforts. And Deanna Reed was there too. You know, she sits back in the black hole, and she was there also, you know, doing her best. Thank you all.
Mrs. Kirby.
Briefly, I just wanted to share that I had the opportunity, I was invited last week by Congressman Quayle to participate in a public school education forum, and later that day he had a separate forum for charter schools, but it was well attended by participants and our legislators and representatives from the Arizona Department of Education. It was a great conversation. Committed to having more on it going forward.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I do want to do a little shout out to the Stars for having a very nice reception. And I got to go to Arcadia to see the exchange students from Switzerland. And one of the coolest things was the Ritz-Carlton project that they do with our Supai kids. So that was a lot of fun. I appreciate them inviting me to that. Dates of the upcoming meetings: Tuesday, June 5th at 4 o'clock, we have a study session. Tuesday, June 5th at 5 o'clock, regular governing board meeting. And then June 19th, and I think Sandra has asked you to check your calendars to see if we might be able to do that about 2 o'clock. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.